Chapter 201, Apparition. It seems that choosing Anduin was indeed the right decision. He is simply the lucky star of the Ministry of Magic. Originally, she planned to have a showdown with these families after the banquet, but now Anduin managed it all by himself. She noticed that some wavering members of the Wizengamot were now nodding sincerely to her, while the rest of the family representatives, who were suspected of harboring Death Eaters, couldn't utter a word of nonsense. Minister Barnold was in a good mood, and Moody happily walked over to Anduin's side. "Good boy. I didn't expect that we were only a little late, and you sneakily took down 10 people, Moody said, squeezing out a horrifying smile and making a face at Anduin. It was truly ghostly. "It's nothing. They were too talkative. If someone gets their face close to your hand, why not pull it out?" Anduin pouted. "Nice job," Moody sneered. "This slap wasn't just for you, but for our Ministry of Magic. These bastards dare not put the Ministry of Magic in their eyes. They want to die." "By the way," Anduin turned his head to look at Moody, a little puzzled. "Why did you come so late? I saw the reporters were let in early, but you were still late." "Humph, it's because of Barty Crouch Jr., Moody snorted coldly. "Barty Crouch Jr.? Anduin turned his head to look at the young man next to Director Crouch. He noticed that the other party had a gloomy face and was licking his lips with his tongue. "That's right. We were ready to come on time, but Barty Crouch Jr. ran over and quarreled with Director Crouch, which caused us to be delayed," Moody said, a little speechlessly. "So that's what happened." Anduin knew that Barty Crouch Jr. was also a Death Eater. It seemed they had planned it early today. They let Barty Crouch Jr. hold Minister Barnold and the others, and then sent Avery to provoke him. The trial meeting in a while will give them a good look. While Anduin was thinking about it, Professor Snape, who had been watching the show, came over to join in the fun. "Congratulations, Anduin. You have won this duel, as I expected. A complete victory, didn't you?" Snape said in a low voice, enunciating every word. "I also have to congratulate you, Professor. You won the bet." Anduin smiled helplessly. "What are you going to ask me to do, or what are you going to ask me to help with?" "Don't worry. That's not a matter for now. I will come to you when I need it." Snape pulled out a note from his pocket and handed it to Anduin. "As a thank you for helping me win, here you are. This is the counter curse you wanted." After handing the note to Anduin, Snape left his side expressionlessly, leaving Anduin a little surprised. What happened to Professor Snape today that he was so kind as to send him a counter curse? Anduin raised his eyebrows in confusion. "It seems that this professor is going to ask me for a big favor. This is an advance payment. But if it comes, let it go," and Anduin accepted the professor's gift very sincerely. "Anduin, thank you for allowing me to watch such a wonderful duel, which even allowed me to find the blood of my youth." Professor Flitwick walked up to Anduin with a smile and praised. "You are too kind." Anduin looked at Professor Flitwick and smiled. "It all depends on your guidance." "You're too modest." Flitwick closed his eyes and shook his head, as if pondering something. "I've always known your potential, but I didn't expect you to be so talented in wizard duels. Especially when I saw that you can skillfully use the Finkel technique, I knew that you must have practiced very diligently. Otherwise, you would not be able to do so calmly. I still remember the first time we met. You showed a firm will and hard work beyond ordinary people. I think this is the result of your long-term persistence," Flitwick said with satisfaction. "It seems that you are very optimistic about Anduin Filius." An old and deep voice came. When they looked back, they found. As Headmaster Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall approached, Flitwick chuckled. "Ha! Isn't this obvious?" he said. Almost all the school deans had gathered, and Anduin quickly greeted them politely. "My goodness, Anduin, I didn't expect you to engage in such dangerous activities. Whether it's facing Death Eaters or recklessly challenging others, it's unbelievable. If I were at Hogwarts, I would definitely have deducted points from you," Professor McGonagall said with a hint of reproach. "It's good for young people to take risks," Dumbledore said, smiling at McGonagall before nodding at Anduin. "You call this an adventure? The first reaction to a Death Eater should be to run away and wait for the Ministry of Magic's rescue, not to rush forward." McGonagall shook her head. "You are right, Professor McGonagall," Anduin responded. In an ideal situation, it is indeed unwise to directly engage in hand-to-hand combat with enemies who outnumber you. Professor McGonagall nodded in approval, but before she could finish, Anduin continued. However, the situation at that time had to be analyzed independently. It's not that I didn't want to escape, but that I couldn't. The mobility of the enemy and us is not equal at all. Those Death Eaters can apparate, but I only have 2 legs. As for the Ministry of Magic, Anduin looked at Moody helplessly. You know the reaction speed of the Ministry. If there had been no quick counterattack at that time, I don't think I would be standing here listening to you now. You don't have to worry about me, Moody snorted angrily. Although the Ministry detected a high-energy magic signal, the guys from the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes were still asleep. If I hadn't checked it out, there would have been no reaction. Anduin's response was correct. Professor McGonagall frowned at Moody's words, realizing he had a point. But Professor McGonagall, you also reminded me of something, Anduin said, smiling at her. Oh, what's that? She asked. In light of this situation of unequal mobility and considering that I may now be a target for many Death Eaters, Anduin said, winking at Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick, I would like to apply in advance to learn Apparition. End of this chapter. Chapter 2-2, Awards. Apparition? Professor McGonagall was taken aback. That's right. I know it's an elective subject for senior grades, but I want to study it in advance. I understand that this kind of magic is very dangerous to practice, so I want to study it under the supervision of a professor, Anduin explained. He didn't dare to study it quietly by himself. It was better to take the opportunity to apply openly. I think it's okay, Flitwick nodded. Anduin is now a battle hero, certified by the Ministry of Magic. It would be bad if those Death Eaters are after you. With Anduin's talent, mastering it shouldn't be difficult. That's true. I have no objection, Professor McGonagall agreed after a moment of thought. Then next semester, please trouble Felius to guide Anduin. I think as a battle hero, he should have the privilege of enjoying some special tutoring. Dumbledore laughed. While they were chatting, a group of Aurors had already finished repairing the damaged venue. Minister Budnor stood on the podium in front of the venue. Everyone, Minister Budnor cast a sonorous charm on himself, and his loud voice attracted everyone's attention to the front. Today, we are here to honor Mr. Anduin Wilson, who bravely fought against the Death Eaters and successfully arrested 5 of them. This is to encourage all wizards to be brave enough to move forward. At the same time, this banquet is also to commemorate all the heroes who sacrificed their lives and shed blood fighting against you-know-who and the Death Eaters. The Ministry of Magic will uphold its firm belief that we will never compromise with those Death Eaters who have committed countless crimes. Minister Budnor's impassioned speech was deafening. All the Aurors in the audience were excited, and the rest of the wizards and reporters responded with warm applause. Never compromise. Never compromise. The crowd began to chant, their voices rising in unison. Under the influence of this atmosphere, even the individual members of the Wizengamot and representatives of the pureblood families, who were usually aloof, had no choice but to applaud and mutter the slogans along with the crowd. If Anduin had lost the duel, Minister Budnor's speech would not have been so forceful, and the reaction of everyone present might have been completely different. Many pureblood family representatives and counselors couldn't help but look at Anduin with resentment. But when they saw Anduin looking back at them indifferently, like a snake, they couldn't help but look away. Why should we be afraid of a little wizard? Thank you. Minister Budnor was very satisfied with everyone's reaction and looked at Anduin with an increasingly kind expression. Next, let me welcome our heroic little hero, Anduin Wilson, who stood up to 5 brutal Death Eaters without fear and single-handedly captured them alive, a well-deserved example for us. After hearing Minister Budnor's words, everyone in the audience turned their eyes to Anduin and gave him warm applause. If it was before today, the applause might have been hypocritical, but after witnessing Anduin's 1-on-10 duel, the applause was extremely sincere. Anduin nodded to everyone, without being humble or overbearing, and walked slowly onto the rostrum. Minister Budnor looked at Anduin and nodded with a smile. Next, on behalf of the Ministry of Magic, I will award Mr. Anduin Wilson the Gold Medal of Courage and the Battle Hero Medal of Honor. After speaking, Minister Budnor took the medals from Barty Crouch and pinned them on Anduin. Mr. Anduin Wilson, I hope you can stick to your principles in the future and continue to contribute your strength to the fight against evil, Minister Budnor said solemnly. I will, Minister Budnor. I have nothing to do with evil, Anduin replied with equal solemnity. Of course, I will handle it my own way, Anduin thought. At the invitation of Minister Budenow, Anduin also gave a grand speech praising the Ministry of Magic and Minister Budenow. The half-show celebration banquet concluded, but the effect was better than Minister Budenow had expected. Anduin, those aurors mentioned that there will be a trial soon, and you need to attend, Dumbledore said, grabbing a handful of candy from the table and stuffing it into his mouth. Yes, Vanessa mentioned it to me. Do you need me to be a witness? Anduin asked, wiping his oily mouth and belching contentedly. Actually, it's not necessary. Today's trial is quite special. It's a retrial of a Death Eater. You are invited more because you are considered a hero, Dumbledore laughed. Principal, don't put me on a pedestal. You know what this title of hero means. I'm just cooperating with Minister Budenow's actions, Anduin said, embarrassed. After you defeated 10 adult wizards in public, this is no longer a simple show, Dumbledore said, grabbing more candy and stuffing it into his pocket. I guess your name is on the front pages of major newspapers every day. Aren't you ready to celebrate? That's just a false title. Real ability can't be showcased in newspapers. I'd rather spend that time reading more books and conducting more experiments, Anduin replied, shaking his head. Dumbledore raised his eyebrows at Anduin's words and asked meaningfully, Then after reading the books and doing the experiments, what are you going to do? Training, tasting food, and doing business, Anduin replied instinctively. Business? Dumbledore looked at Anduin in surprise. Yes, I recently acquired a house in Diagon Alley. It would be a waste not to use it. Perhaps I will count on you to patronize it in the future, Anduin said, regaining his spirits and chatting with Dumbledore about a few products he planned to mass-produce. Ha-ha! Dumbledore laughed heartily. I will definitely support your business in the future, Boss Wilson. As they were chatting happily, Moody walked over. Don't eat anymore. The trial is about to start. Let's go. Dumbledore and Anduin nodded and followed Moody to the courtroom. The courtroom of the Ministry of Magic is located on the 10th basement floor and cannot be reached by elevator, only by descending the stairs. End of this chapter. Chapter 203. Judgemaster Anduin and the others took their seats. The room was already filled with people, mostly Wizengamot counselors, aurors, and reporters. A 2-meter-high metal cage stood in the center of the venue, surrounded by a large number of inward-facing spikes. Director Barty Crouch sat in the middle of the trial seat, with Anduin seated next to Dumbledore and Moody. Everyone is here. Let's get started, Barty Crouch announced after surveying the room. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement has interrogated all the Death Eaters beforehand, and all have pleaded guilty and been sentenced to Azkaban. However, one of the Death Eaters, Igor Karkaroff, has expressed his willingness to provide information to the Ministry of Magic in exchange for a reduced sentence or release. Today, we need all of you to jointly judge whether the intelligence value of Karkaroff's confession meets the criteria for commutation or release. Each member of the Wizengamot has 1 vote. Then Barty Crouch turned his head to look at Anduin. This trial is quite special. This is the Death Eater you personally arrested. When it comes to his freedom, Minister Budnow said that you can also cast a vote. Do you agree with this? Agreed. The surrounding Wizengamot judges expressed their opinions one after another, clearly not willing to embarrass the freshly baked combat hero over such a trivial matter. Oh, this is because they were concerned about my feelings. That's why it was arranged like this. Minister Budnow really knows how to win people over. 1 vote doesn't affect the overall outcome, but it shows enough respect, Anduin thought, nodding thoughtfully to Director Crouch. But today, I will not vote against it. The prisoner you are trying is my future brother. Okay, bring Igor Karkaroff up. There was a sound of gears and chains twisting from the metal cage in the center, and Karkaroff was lifted up through a hole under the cage. Karkaroff looked at the crowd of onlookers who suddenly appeared around him with some trepidation. Especially after seeing Anduin, he glanced at him nervously from time to time. But Anduin showed a curious expression as if meeting him for the first time, which reminded Karkaroff to stop looking away and focus on Director Crouch directly opposite him. Igor Karkaroff, at your request, we will give you the opportunity during this trial to provide the intelligence and evidence you know to the Council. If your intelligence is judged to be of sufficient value, we may even consider ordering your release. Are you willing to accept this condition? Director Crouch asked. I accept, Master Chief, Karkaroff responded, glancing at Anduin again before nodding. What are you willing to offer? Crouch inquired. Names, the names of Death Eaters. Karkaroff swallowed and said according to Anduin's arrangement. Continue. Director Crouch asked with great interest. Karkaroff then reported the names of Death Eaters one by one according to the list he got from Anduin. He mentioned August Rookwood, the agent of the Department of Mysteries, the Caro siblings, Avery, Raleigh Yaxley's brother Cobain Yaxley, and others. He explained everyone on the list except for Snape. The details of his report surprised everyone present. Apart from the crimes committed by the Death Eaters, he even provided their current locations. Such a detailed report caused a burst of criticism from everyone around, including Director Barty Crouch, who was taken aback for a moment. Finally, Karkaroff couldn't help but glance at Anduin. After seeing Anduin's slight nod, he gritted his teeth and called out the name. Barty Crouch, Jr. The crowd couldn't help but be shocked when they heard the name, exclaiming one after another. They all looked at Barty Crouch in the center of the rostrum, then turned their heads to look for his son, Barty Crouch, Jr. Anduin was sitting not far from Karkaroff. In fact, Karkaroff had sensed something was amiss from the moment he began his confession. This guy knew too much, even down to the current positions of individuals, as if he had an internal list of Death Eaters. When Karkaroff called out his name, Barty Crouch Jr. couldn't contain himself any longer. With a hideous expression, he frantically drew his wand and pointed it at Karkaroff. You bastard traitor! Go to hell! Avada! Ah! Just as Barty Jr. stood up and was about to attack, a flash of silver light appeared. When everyone saw it clearly, it turned out to be a silver metal snake. The silver snake was biting Barty Crouch Jr.'s wrist tightly and was coiled around his arm, instantly interrupting his spellcasting. Anduin had been paying close attention to Karkaroff when he was about to reveal Barty Jr.'s name. As soon as Barty Jr. drew his wand, Anduin quickly cast the Spirit Snake spell. Grab him, quick! A group of Aurors rushed forward to apprehend Barty Jr., and Anduin took the opportunity to retract his spirit-binding snake. Damn it, it's all your fault, you little bastard! Anduin Wilson! Barty Crouch Jr. shouted as he was being dragged past Anduin by the Aurors, his face twisted with rage. He looked as if he wanted to devour Anduin alive. Heh, the wailing of a defeated dog, Anduin thought coldly as he watched Barty Jr. being dragged away. He did not respond to his curses. If it wasn't for getting Karkaroff off the hook, I wouldn't have let you go so easily, Anduin mused to himself. Good job, Anduin. You reacted quickly enough. I suspected there was something off about that kid, but I didn't expect him to be a Death Eater, Moody said, patting Anduin on the shoulder. It was just luck. I didn't even have time to pull out my wand, Anduin replied, shaking his head slightly. The revelation that Barty Crouch Jr. was a Death Eater was still echoing through the venue, leaving everyone in shock. Even Barty Crouch Sr. was momentarily speechless. The scene descended into commotion until Dumbledore stood up. Quiet! Dumbledore's commanding presence silenced the room. The trial continued, but Director Barty Crouch seemed unable to recover from the shocking news. As the father of Barty Crouch Jr., and as a party concerned, I am no longer qualified to preside over this trial, Director Crouch said, looking up at Dumbledore. Dumbledore, I will ask you to take over the next interrogation. With that, Director Crouch staggered down from the rostrum and walked out of the courtroom, his heart heavy. Sorry for being a few minutes late. I got it late today and posted it on time. End of this chapter. Chapter 204, Protection Array. After that, Dumbledore calmly took over the trial and, following a vote by the council, delivered the verdict. Igor Karkaroff was released in court, because he provided extremely valuable information. After the trial, Anduin bid farewell to everyone and returned to Longbottom House with Augusta. In the following days, wizard radio stations and various newspapers continuously reported on the celebration banquet. The battle hero lives up to his name. Anduin Wilson challenged 10 adult wizards at the banquet and won a complete victory. Minister Budnow delivered a speech vowing to fight the Death Eaters to the end. Shock! Barty Crouch Jr., son of the Director of Legal Enforcement, has been identified as a Death Eater and was caught red-handed. Barty Crouch has taken the blame and resigned as Director of the Division of Legal Enforcement, now replaced by Amelia Burns. Exclusive report. Secrets you don't know about the fighting hero Anduin Wilson. An exclusive interview with his close friend, Vivienne. Anduin noticed a peculiar piece of news while flipping through the newspaper, but he didn't have the heart to pay attention to it at the moment. After returning to the Longbottom House, Anduin spent a few days visiting the surrounding neighbors, including the Weasleys, the Diggories, and the Lovegoods. He reminisced with them about old times and gave each family a defensive amulet as a gift. He also accepted an exclusive interview with Rita Skeeter. Of course, it was an exclusive interview in name only. In reality, he provided her with a written press release and posed for some photos. Rita Skeeter was very satisfied with this arrangement. Not only did Anduin hold her little secret in his hands, but he was also a fighting hero of the Ministry of Magic. No one else had the chance to interview him, which elevated her status significantly. After completing these tasks, Anduin officially bid farewell to Augusta and moved to live in Diagon Alley. He planned to complete the security system of his new house and digest the gains from his recent experiences. The first priority was the protection work to ensure his own safety. Although the Ministry of Magic's reputation was at its peak during this period, and no Death Eaters or Dark Wizards dared to show themselves, Anduin's cautious nature demanded foolproof security. He began by laying out the protective magic circle for the entire house. The material he chose was Pallasser brass. Although this material was cheap, he had enough of it to cover the entire outer wall of the house, serving as the protective circle for the magic array. The magic pipeline was also sufficient. Anduin first used his magic to draw the spell array he had designed on the walls. He then melted the Pallasser brass into filaments and embedded them along the lines of the array, much like completing a work of cloisonné enamel. All lines were coherent and transparent. After spending 5 days, Anduin had painted the walls and floors of the entire house, including the fireplace and the entrance to the sewer, with magic circles. This process consumed almost all the Pallasser brass he had. The function of this set of magic circles was to serve as a channel for the output of magic power. Additionally, it incorporated the coordination spell he had recently learned. The center of the magic circle was arranged in the basement bedroom. Based on this magic circle, multiple layers of spells could be covered, ensuring the output of magic power to support the operation of the spells. This way, there was no need to recast spells every once in a while, unlike the Death Eaters. However, supporting the magic circle required a continuous supply of magic power. To solve this problem, Anduin planned to enchant the energy-absorbing charm he had tested and improved before, both inside and outside the house. Inside the house, Anduin worked diligently to absorb the free magic power from the outside world. Simultaneously, he conducted experiments, allowing the magic power released during spellcasting to be reabsorbed and utilized. Excess mana was channeled into his inscribed storage charms, completing a comprehensive magic circle. The next step was to arrange the protective spells. Following the defense map he had previously drawn, Anduin began engraving various protective and warning spells onto the rune array. It took another 3 days to complete the layout of all the protective units, including updating the protective spells at the entrance to the basement. The protection included Total Protection, Safeguarding, Anti-Alohomora Curse, Anti-Apparition, Anti-Invasion Curse, and more. For Vigilance, there were spells like Human Tracking Curse, Confusion Curse, Muffliato, and Malicious Perception. The house was transformed into a miniature fortress, impervious to outside observation or intrusion. Anyone with malicious intent nearby would trigger an alarm, An entry through apparition or unlocking curses was impossible, leaving only a strong attack as a viable option. In the future, I'll take time to add some active and passive defense mechanisms to the house, such as mines, traps, and defensive structures. For now, this will suffice, Anduin thought, satisfied with the current level of protection. At that moment, the house's warning charm alerted him. Someone had appeared in front of his house, but no malice was detected. Then, there was a knock on the door on the first floor. "You actually came. I thought you might run away," Anduin said, smiling at Karkaroff, who stood at the door. "Master, I am loyal to you and would never disobey your orders," Karkaroff replied nervously, glancing around while wearing a cloak. "I was just recently cast out, and the Ministry of Magic doesn't trust me. The Death Eaters see me as a traitor, so I've been hiding." "All right, come in," Anduin said, stepping aside to open the door and ignoring Karkaroff's excuses. He led Karkaroff into the house and directly to the living room on the second floor. "Master, I have reported the list to the Ministry of Magic as you ordered. Is that satisfactory?" Karkaroff asked hesitantly, pointing to his stomach. He knew what had happened to Tokiel, who had died suddenly in front of everyone. The metal pill that killed Tokiel had been fed to him by Anduin, and Karkaroff still had one of those capsules in his stomach. This was why he had been living in constant fear, unable to sleep or eat properly, and dared not betray Anduin. "Don't worry. Just let it stay in your stomach. The quality of that capsule is very reliable. It won't malfunction for 10 or 20 years. I'm not the kind of person who kills randomly, as long as you remain honest," Anduin reassured him with a laugh. "You can tell that to Tokiel," Karkaroff thought bitterly to himself, remembering how merciless Anduin had been when he killed Tokiel. He looked at Anduin helplessly, his face etched with despair. End of this chapter. Chapter 205, Analyzing the Lightning Magic Text. "Do you have an opinion?" Anduin asked sternly, noticing Karkaroff's apparent dissatisfaction. "No, I dare not," Karkaroff quickly replied, forcing a flattering smile. "What are your plans next? Given your current situation, I can't openly take you in. Soon, you won't be able to stay in the British magical world. The White Wizards don't want to see you, and the Dark Wizards want you dead," Anduin said, handing Karkaroff a glass of butterbeer from the nearby wine cabinet. "Thank you, Master," Karkaroff said cautiously. "My younger brother teaches at the Durmstrang Institute in the Nordic region. When you ordered me to find a place to stay, I thought of him. He wrote back, saying he would be happy to take me in. With your permission, I think I can go to him." "Durmstrang is relatively tolerant of dark magic, which suits you well," Anduin nodded, pulling out a letter and a piece of parchment from his pocket. "Going to Northern Europe will also help you temporarily escape the Death Eater's pursuit. However, you need to do a few things for me once you get there." This letter is from Yaxley to his brother. When you arrive in Europe, use this letter to find him and keep him under surveillance. Of course, prioritize your own safety and try to do this after you settle down. At the very least, you need to know his whereabouts. Understand? "Yes, Master," Karkaroff nodded, accepting the envelope. "This parchment lists the materials I need. Some of these can't be obtained in England except by smuggling. Collect as many as you can for me," Anduin continued, handing Karkaroff a leather bag. "Here are 500 gold galleons. Use them to buy materials and for your journey to Northern Europe. If you need more money, send me a letter, but don't try to deceive me. I know the value of these items." "Master, I understand. Don't worry," Karkaroff said sweetly, happily accepting the money bag. "And this is a messenger tracking talisman. Wear it close to your body. I will use it to find you in the future. If you lose it, I can only track you through the device in your stomach. If the capsule explodes due to instability, it's not my problem," Anduin warned, tossing the talisman to Karkaroff. "Understood, Master." Karkaroff nervously took the amulet and quickly put it close to his body. He planned to find a chain to wear it around his neck every day. "Pack your things and set off as soon as possible. Although the Dark Wizards are low-key now, they might be watching you," Anduin said seriously. "Remember to complete my mission. You know my methods, so don't try to deceive me." "Yes, Master. I promise to complete the task. Don't worry," Karkaroff replied earnestly, realizing his life still had value to Anduin. He then quietly left through Anduin's fireplace. Anduin had a clear plan for his future, which included venturing into Europe. Now was the perfect time to have Karkaroff pave the way for him. After dealing with Karkaroff's matter, Anduin could finally focus on his own tasks. He returned to the second bedroom on the third floor, which he had arranged as a study and laboratory. He also planned to convert the basement into a secret laboratory for more sensitive research in the future. After closing the door, Anduin eagerly took out the metal magic book. He turned directly to the page with the ancient lightning rune, ready to delve into its mysteries. Anduin was about to begin analyzing the original rune. Although he had never attempted to analyze original runes before, he had gained experience under the guidance of Professor Burns by analyzing many basic runes. The process of analyzing runes involves extending one's own magical power to interact with the runes, as their intricate structures are often too subtle to be understood with the naked eye alone. Fully comprehending the structure of a rune is essential for constructing it with one's own magic, which is a prerequisite for developing and optimizing spells. Scholars who can restore paper runes from ruins or ancient texts are highly esteemed, as this task can take decades. However, analyzing an unknown rune, especially an original one, is inherently dangerous. No one can predict what might happen when one's magic power comes into contact with such a rune. Therefore, Anduin made thorough preparations. First, he cleared the room of all unnecessary furniture. He placed various potions beside the test bench, including fresh potions, nourishing potions, anti-scalding potions, and Felicia potions. He chose not to store them in his interspatial bag because he anticipated that his magic power might be heavily consumed, and having potions readily available would be more convenient if he needed to replenish his strength quickly. Next, Anduin donned a set of plastic clothing that covered him from head to toe, leaving only his right hand, which held the wand, exposed. This non-conductive attire was to prevent any electrical currents from causing secondary damage, as the lightning rune would still adhere to the laws of physics. With everything in place, Anduin carefully held his wand and slowly extended it towards the lightning rune. Suddenly, there was a change. As soon as he moved his wand forward, an electric current surged towards it before he even had a chance to channel his magic power. The unexpected jolt startled Anduin, but he quickly steadied himself. Upon closer inspection, he realized that he felt no pain or discomfort. It seemed that the rune was attracted to his wand, with currents continuously flowing into it. The dark painting on his wand appeared to react to the stimulation, as fine lines of silver-blue light emerged along its intricate patterns. Despite this, Anduin's right hand felt no discomfort. Could this rune be resonating with the dark painting? Anduin speculated, though he wasn't entirely sure. It doesn't seem harmful. It might be related to the materials of the dark painting, such as the thunder feather and lightning strike wood. I should try activating my magic power. With a plan in mind, Anduin began to slowly channel his magic power. As soon as his magic made contact with the lightning rune, he couldn't help but let out a cry of comfort. End of this chapter. Chapter 206, Wild Thunder. As the magic power in his body touched the rune, Anduin felt a weak electric current travel along his wand and arm, straight to his brain. It bloomed in his mind like brilliant sparks of neuron discharge. The sensation was numbing, cold, and goosebump-inducing. After the electric current flashed through, it left him with a refreshing feeling, akin to the sensation of taking a shower on a hot summer day. It was incredibly comfortable. When he concentrated again, Anduin could clearly feel his magic power blending with the lightning rune in his wand, deepening his connection with dark drawing. Under this influence, his wand underwent wonderful changes. The darkly painted Thunderbird's wand core felt rejuvenated under the influence of the lightning rune. It's unbelievable. This feeling is like the breath of life appearing in the dark painting. Could it be that this rune is also from a Thunderbird? Anduin pondered, noticing the special nature of the rune. It seemed to have an intrinsic connection to him and his wand. Since the rune posed no danger, Anduin decided to finish analyzing it in one go. With his previous perception, he became more courageous and gradually extended his magic power along the dark painting to the rune. Boom! As his perception followed the magic power into the rune, it burst into a dazzling silver light, flickering intensely throughout the house. If someone were to look in from outside, they might think a disco was happening inside. Contrary to the intense light and shadow effect, what Anduin felt from the rune was entirely different. A foreign scene appeared in his mind, seemingly the memory of the rune's owner. He saw a desolate savanna from a bird's-eye view, with sparse yellow grass, dead trees, rattlesnakes coiled beside the weeds, and occasionally antelopes and hares running across the ground. The owner of this vision moved incredibly fast, climbing from a low altitude almost instantly. The ground scene grew smaller, replaced by clouds that appeared around him. The target of this vision was a mottled thick cloud, like a black curtain or a piece of iron connected by a mountain gorge, pressing down on the ground with great force. Within it, the violent wind roared like a devil, and lightning tore across the sky like claws. It was chasing the storm. Anduin followed the vision, plunging into the storm's center. The strong wind and raindrops tormented him, but he rushed skyward without hesitation, heading straight into the heart of the raging thunderstorm. As the vision pulled in, lightning flashed nearby, accompanied by crackling sounds as they passed through the air, and a dry smell lingered. This seemed to excite and delight the vision's owner even more. It twisted hard, swarming toward the thickest and strongest silver lightning descending from the sky. Anduin could feel both joy and sorrow from this memory. The joy stemmed from an instinctive attachment to evolution and a love for thunder and lightning. The sorrow came from the realization that its life was nearing its end. As it encountered the thunderlight, a powerful magical surge emanated from the vision's owner. What followed was a scene Anduin would never forget. This magical power turned it into a lightning rod, constantly attracting surrounding electric charges. All the lightning in the storm's center seemed to find their target, rushing toward it one after another. Consequently, the magic power within it grew stronger and stronger, allowing it to climb to a peak as if it were on the verge of winning a new life. After crossing this peak seems to be close at hand, yet it also feels as if it is far away in the sky. The charge within a few miles has almost been exhausted, but it still seems to be just a little bit short. In the end, the owner of this vision exhausted all his strength but failed to achieve a breakthrough. He could only slide down from the sky, covered in solid lightning. The scene in memory came to an abrupt end. What is this? Anduin finally recovered from the memory. A dying memory of a thunderbird? The old thunderbird was chasing the thunderstorm, trying to find a breakthrough. In the end, it seemed to fall just short, disappearing with regret, and this thunderbolt rune was condensed on its body? I didn't expect that the final memory of this thunderbird would remain on this rune, allowing me to witness the magnificent scene of it battling with nature and itself. Anduin let out a long breath, as if he had just recovered from the memory. He gradually analyzed the origin and truth of the rune. It's no wonder there is a resonance between the rune and the dark painting. It turns out they are related, and this original rune seems to have condensed a life force belonging to that thunderbird. It's incredible. However, if that thunderbird had absorbed enough lightning, could it really have been reborn? I haven't found any corresponding records in the books on magical creatures. This might be a new discovery about a magical creature like the thunderbird. The feeling of chasing new life is a bit like the legend of a vulture plucking its feathers and cutting its beak to bring itself back to life. Anduin shook his head. He was not a magical biologist and didn't want to delve into it. The most urgent task was to quickly analyze this rune. In fact, after Anduin entered that memory, he had already formed a connection with the rune. It could even be said that he almost re-experienced the process of forming this original rune. So when he poured magic power into the magic text again and tried to analyze it, it was no longer difficult. It was simply a piece of cake. It took only a few minutes for Anduin to grasp the structure and texture of the rune clearly. It could even be said that even if this rune were handed over to others for analysis, they would not be able to achieve his level of understanding. After Anduin removed the plastic suit, he clasped his left hand, and a lightning rune constructed with his magic power clearly appeared in his palm. Although no follow-up tests have been carried out, You can clearly feel its strength just by manifesting it. Anduin smiled as he looked at the rune. Since you were born in the wilderness, this lightning rune shall be called Wild Thunder. The derived rune of the fire elemental rune is Fierce Fire, and the derived rune of the lightning elemental rune is Wild Thunder. Quite appropriate. Anduin read with satisfaction, looking at the shining lightning rune in his hand. End of this chapter. Chapter 207. Development Ideas of the Lightning Rune. Anduin shifted his gaze to the magic book, where the original lightning rune lay quietly. Since you originate from the Thunderbird, you should be able to coexist harmoniously with the dark painting, he mused, formulating a new idea. He placed the dark drawing over the original rune once more and activated his magic to absorb it. With a zip, the original rune was absorbed into Anduin's body. It felt like he had taken a powerful tonic. The Thunderbird feather staff within him became more vibrant, and the lightning-struck ebony wand he wielded was also nourished. The handle, originally a matte color, now emitted circles of silver halos. As it gradually calmed, it returned to its matte state, but the fine lines on the wand seemed to be inlaid with strands of silver threads, giving it a truly exquisite appearance. Very well. It seems that Anhui is very satisfied with the Wild Thunder rune. Anduin nodded in satisfaction. Next, we need to focus on testing the various parameters of the Wild Thunder. Without delay, Anduin quickly tidied up the laboratory. The plastic protective suit and potions were no longer needed and were put away. He then took out various instruments from his space bag, carefully arranging and connecting them. The main task is to conduct a voltage test and compare the Wild Thunder with the basic lightning runes. Let's start with a magic power output of 5 ticks. Anduin activated the large multimeter on the test bench, a standard instrument for measuring voltage that he had purchased from a Muggle store. He then took out a small shelf with a 1 millimeter thick copper wire and carefully connected the 2 poles of the multimeter to the wire. He didn't use his wand for this test. The dark drawing, now containing the Wild Thunder rune, would undoubtedly enhance the casting of the rune, and using the wand might affect the accuracy of the data collection. Anduin held his left hand open, and an ordinary lightning rune appeared in his palm. He controlled his magic power output, guiding the current to discharge through the copper wire at a magic power output of 5 ticks. He repeated this process 10 times, recording the data from the multimeter each time. Afterward, he dispersed the lightning rune and summoned the Wild Thunder rune, maintaining the same magic power output of 5 ticks. He discharged the current through the copper wire 10 times again, recording the data. Under the influence of my willpower and the calm emotions I deliberately controlled, the magic strength did not fluctuate significantly, Anduin noted. With this consistency, the average voltage of the ordinary lightning rune was around 200 volts, while the Wild Thunder rune averaged around 1,000 volts. That means, with the same magic power output and strength, the voltage generated by Wild Thunder is 5 times that of the ordinary rune. Is it really that exaggerated? Anduin compared the data in surprise. This already exceeds the scope of low-voltage electricity. With prolonged practice and the enhancement from the dark drawing, increasing the output ratio could potentially reach the power of high voltage or even ultra-high voltage in the future. This discovery bolstered Anduin's confidence in the potential of the Wild Thunder rune, truly worthy of its ancient origins. However, it's important to consider that electric energy attenuates significantly when propagating through the air. This is why I haven't practiced lightning magic extensively before. To extend the attack range, sufficient strength and conductors are needed. The best conductor among them is actually magic power. This means that the farther the attack distance, Anduin pondered the application of wild lightning in combat tactics. Directly using lightning to attack requires substantial magical support. To reduce the loss of magic power, you need to be quick, complete the spell casting rapidly, or combine it with other spells, or form some attack runes. Following his inspiration, Anduin recorded his next search directions on parchment. 1. Develop high-speed, high-density electric shock spells. 2. Replace the lightning runes in existing lightning magic with desolate thunder, such as in the Weather Curse. 3. Explore other functions for electric energy, such as ball lightning, electromagnetic gun, and electromagnetic pulse. 4. Create tactics that can be used in conjunction with other spells, like electric water gun or flying crow with a thunderstorm function. 5. Design equipment that can match and carry desolate thunder. For instance, inscribing the magic text of Desolate Thunder on the binding spirit snake could yield good results. 6. Test whether the Wild Thunder rune has other characteristics similar to Fiendfire, which is not only powerful but also nearly inextinguishable, mimetic, and actively burns all flammable objects around it. After deciding on his research direction, Anduin prepared to spend the rest of the summer vacation developing the Wild Thunder rune he had just acquired. He also planned to digest the many books and knowledge collected from the Travers family. With a large amount of material at his disposal, he had more opportunities to showcase his alchemy skills. The following days were monotonous. Anduin studied books every morning and conducted various spell experiments and casting exercises in the laboratory in the afternoons. He also drew blueprints and created alchemy props. Only at dinner time would he visit the Leaky Cauldron to have a good meal and chat with Tom. Soon, Anduin's summer vacation passed quickly, and he found himself at King's Cross Station alone once again. However, unlike before, the previously low-key Anduin now attracted everyone's attention on Platform 9 3/4. Over the summer, Anduin had completely changed his appearance. His monocle had been upgraded from brass to silver, and his hair was cut short, yet he was still recognized by everyone. It was no surprise, given that news about Anduin, the battle hero, had been ubiquitous, making his recognition rate almost 100%. Everyone pointed at him, but he remained calm. After boarding the train, he found an empty compartment and settled in. "Hey, Anduin, how was your summer vacation?" Vivian greeted him as she entered the carriage. Anduin glanced at her, slightly exasperated. What happened to that so-called exclusive report? Chapter 208. Don't be afraid. It doesn't hurt. "Ah, it's been a while since I last saw you. How did you change your hairstyle? You suddenly cut your hair so short that I almost didn't recognize you," Vivienne exclaimed, trying to divert the conversation when Anduin asked about the report. Anduin couldn't help but glare at her. "You asked about that interview. It just so happened that I met a reporter at the banquet that day and he was very interested in your news." Vivienne explained awkwardly. "You don't know, gossip about you was worth a lot of money back then, so—" She trailed off. "So you sold me out?" Anduin asked, exasperated. "Don't put it that way. I'm doing it for your own good too. This can help you gain popularity. You're now a celebrity in the wizarding world," Vivienne said with a giggle, trying to brush it off. "Holding barbecue parties at school every day, torturing classmates with inhuman training. Is this your idea of making me famous? And why does half of your report talk about your mahjong club?" Anduin scolded. "That's the reporter writing nonsense. It has nothing to do with me," Vivienne argued loudly. "He was interested in my mahjong club, so he wrote about it." Vivienne, thick-skinned as ever, was just fooling around, and Anduin felt helpless. At that moment, Charles and Velen walked into the carriage. "Good job, you guys. Sit down quickly," Anduin said, seeing them enter. He began to prepare something on his body. "Huh? What's the matter? By the way, why did you change your hairstyle? Didn't your long hair look nice?" Charles asked curiously, but obediently sat down beside him. "Please do me a favor," Anduin said, taking out a small wooden rack filled with test tubes, along with several sets of plastic-sealed medical needles, povidone iodine for disinfection, cotton swabs, and other items. "What are you going to do?" Vivienne, who had lived in the Muggle world since she was a child, immediately recognized the items for drawing blood and showed a fearful expression. "Don't be nervous. I'm going to give you a physical examination to check your magic reserves," Anduin said expressionlessly, grabbing her arm. "Don't come near me. I was wrong. I shouldn't have been interviewed by those gossip magazines. Don't draw my blood. I'm afraid of pain." Vivienne pleaded as Anduin rolled up her sleeve and skillfully applied disinfectant to the inside of her arm. Despite her struggles and pleas for mercy, Anduin didn't let her break free. He held her tightly and said seriously, "Don't move around, or it will go in the wrong place." "It's in! Don't! It hurts! The blood is coming out!" Vivienne cried, tears welling up in her eyes. Anduin efficiently drew half a test tube of blood from her. Charles and the others watched Anduin's precise movements in silence. Although they had been slacking off during the summer vacation, this seemed a bit extreme. After collecting Vivienne's blood, Anduin immediately labeled it, nodding in satisfaction. He then turned to the rest of the group. "It's your turn next. Don't worry, it will be quick. See, Vivienne has already stopped crying." "No, tell me clearly, what exactly is this for? You don't want to study black magic, do you?" Charles asked, confused. "I told you, it's to test your magic reserves. Why are you so nervous?" Anduin said, extending his hand towards Charles. 10 minutes later, Anduin tidied up the test tubes in front of him with a satisfied expression, while everyone else looked like they had survived a catastrophe. As people who had lived in the wizarding world since they were young, they couldn't understand Anduin's behavior at all. Their parents had always taught them that blood was a medium for powerful magic, and this experience had left them bewildered. Anduin's ability to drain blood so effortlessly stemmed from the trust placed in him. Despite this, there was still an air of panic among them, as they didn't fully grasp what Anduin had previously mentioned. "We are wizards. When did you become a doctor, and why do you need to draw blood? If you want to do a blood test, you don't even have a machine," Vivienne, who was only slightly resistant due to her fear of pain, asked, puzzled. "Just wait and see," Anduin replied with a slight smile, then began to take out a few items. He produced an object the size of a plate, resembling a mirror without the reflective surface, somewhat akin to a modern electronic scale. It had a smooth, round surface in the center and 2 small boxes displaying numbers below. He handed it to Vivienne. "Come on, put your hand on it." "Why? Are you going to do something weird to me again?" Vivienne asked, now a bit afraid of him. Since the start of the summer vacation, he had suddenly acquired many strange items. "It doesn't hurt this time, don't panic," Anduin reassured her expressionlessly. Half believing, Vivienne placed her hand on the disc. A magical ripple flashed on the disc, extending from her palm to her entire body as if scanning her. After a moment, a line of numerical values appeared under the disc, and Anduin quickly recorded them. He then took out a dropper-like device, adjusted it a few times in his hand, and inserted it into the test tube containing Vivienne's blood. The device automatically sucked out a certain amount of blood. Anduin connected the dropper to the disc with a metal wire, and an item was displayed below the original value on the disc. 168 ticks? Why is your level the same as that of a third-year freshman? It seems your previous foundation is too poor. You'll need to work harder this school year, Anduin said, shaking his head with some dissatisfaction. What? What are you doing? Why can't I understand? Vivienne asked, suddenly feeling an ominous premonition. This is the Magic Measuring Instrument 2.0 I just developed, Anduin explained, raising the disc and dropper in his hand. This disc detects the total amount of blood in your body, and the dropper accurately absorbs a certain amount of blood to measure the magic power contained in it. I discovered, through experiments some time ago, that the magic power reserves in a wizard's blood account for exactly half of the magic power in their entire body. So, by taking a sample of blood and measuring its magic power, then multiplying it by the total amount of blood in the body and doubling it, I can measure the total magic power reserve of the entire body. End of this chapter. Chapter 209, Exploring the Forbidden Forest. So, when the disc measures the total amount of blood in the body and the dropper measures a certain amount of magic power, connecting them allows the magic program I set up to calculate Vivienne's magic power, Anduin explained to everyone. Then what do you mean by 168 ticks? Velen asked, clearly intrigued by the instrument Anduin mentioned. Ticks are the unit I use to measure magic power. The magic power consumed by casting the Lumos spell is taken as 1 tick. In other words, Vivienne, your magic power is only enough to cast the Lumos spell 168 times in a row. Then I'm pretty good, Vivienne said with some complacency. You are already in the 4th grade, so having a magic power reserve at the level of a 3rd grader is nothing to be proud of, Anduin said sternly. Hearing this, Vivienne pouted. Then what can I do? I can't make it rise by itself. So we need to strengthen training, Anduin said, ignoring Vivienne's reluctance. He looked at the rest of the group. You too. Anduin then used the same method to test the others. After digitizing their mana values, it became much clearer. Velen, with 382 ticks, had the highest value among them and was expected to break through the 700 tick standard before the 7th grade. Charles had 257 ticks, which was not bad. Bill had 143 ticks, and with more practice, he could surpass Vivienne. Zlatan Ibrahimovic had 118 ticks, still affected by his thin body. After checking everyone's mana values, Anduin had a clear understanding. Velen had the highest value due to his age, which was normal. Charles's increase was significant, much higher than last year's fuzzy measurement. It seemed that after the 3rd grade, young wizards experienced a period of magic power growth. Ibrahimovic's level was normal for a 2nd grader, but Bill showed the strongest potential. With proper training, he might surpass Charles in 2 years. With the new measuring instrument, the next training experiment could proceed more smoothly. The magic power growth curve for each age, physical training, magic power sensitivity training, willpower training, energy intake, and other factors affecting magic power amplification efficiency could be observed through group experiments. Anduin looked at his own mana value, 418 ticks. It seemed that eating more magical creature meat was very effective. He glanced at the group, especially Vivienne, and formulated a plan for the test groups. Velen, approaching adulthood, would focus on combat tactics training. Ibrahimovic would do independent physical training, Bill would specialize in sensitivity training, and Charles would hone his willpower. As for Vivienne, since she was afraid of suffering, she would eat magical creature meat daily to see how it affected her magic power increase. They would rotate one event a month and conduct multi-event cross-training to find a pattern. Thinking of this, Anduin couldn't help but chuckle, causing goosebumps for everyone around him. Hogwarts ushered in a new school year. For Anduin, this year was unremarkable, but for other young wizards, the summer vacation had been too exciting. From the entrance ceremony, it was clear that almost everyone, whether old students or freshmen, focused their attention on Anduin. This young man, who usually had no sense of presence, was now the center of attention. The school had even nicknamed him the Ghost of the Snake Court, but now he had become a fighting hero, making more people remember Anduin's name. This was especially true for the students in Slytherin House, particularly the former pureblood wizards. Initially, they were blackmailed by Anduin and were still trying to find a way to get rid of him. But now, this kid had suddenly become a hero, turning their situation into a desperate nightmare. Anduin, however, didn't care about the strange looks from others. His thoughts were entirely immersed in his own research, and he seemed indifferent to everyone else. Even when he returned to the common room, he went straight to the door, Matori without stopping, busy tinkering with his own projects. The other students from the same house didn't even have a chance to strike up a conversation with him. 2 months later, on a weekend, Anduin found himself outside the Forbidden Forest, fully armed and ready to venture into its depths for the first time. Usually, he only wandered around the outskirts to help Hagrid feed the colonies of magical animals. The reason for his presence today was Hagrid's complaint about finding many magical creatures brutally killed during his inspections of the Forbidden Forest. This had even affected the magical biome maintained by the Academy. A Tibo warthog and a Reem bull had been dismembered, and a hippogriff was badly wounded, with injuries that did not appear to be the work of predators. This situation had made Professor Kettleburn and Hagrid very worried, prompting Hagrid to increase his patrols. Although this issue initially had nothing to do with Anduin, the Tibo warthog and Reem cattle were important to him. Most of his magical creature classes, over the past 2 years, had involved helping Professor Kettleburn raise these animals. After finally raising them to be fat and strong, someone had snatched them away, which was unbearable for Anduin. Moreover, he was genuinely concerned about Hagrid facing this unknown threat alone, so he decided to investigate it himself. This also gave him an opportunity to test his research results, including upgraded alchemy equipment and newly developed spells. It should be here. Last time, the hippogriff was attacked here. There are still bloodstains on the ground, so let's start here, Anduin muttered to himself. He knelt down and stretched out his fingers, touching the dark red mud. After wiping away the dirt from his hand, he raised his hand and adjusted the monocle on his right eye. Another scene appeared in his line of sight, where the blood-stained ground flashed with a reddish light. Anduin drew out his wand and muttered an incantation over the bloodstain. More mottled light spots appeared around the bloodstain in his vision, and even colored mist of light floated in the air above it. Chapter 210, Tracing Curse. This is the latest tracking spell developed by Anduin, which he calls the Tracing Charm. It is an advanced version of the traditional tracking spell, enhanced by incorporating elements of blood magic, scent runes, and temperature runes. Anduin has also engraved the corresponding manifestation spell onto a new monocle. When used together, these tools allow for the detection of elements such as bloodstains, footprints, scent traces, and vital signs. Bloodstains on the ground appear as light red in sight, while light spots around the ground indicate traces of biological activities related to the bloodstain. The fog above represents scent traces. The touch and duration of time will also reveal different shades of halo. This spell has two primary usages: non-locking investigation and sample locking for precise tracking. In non-locking investigation mode, the spell reveals clues within the field of vision. However, this method is relatively easy to disturb, requiring careful distinction of each clue. The second method involves locking onto a sample for precise tracking. For instance, Anduin is currently locking onto the blood of a hippogriff, and the surrounding light spots are also related to the hippogriff. There are the most clues here, Anduin noted, observing the numerous bloodstains and feathers left on the ground. The preliminary judgment is that they belong to hippogriffs. There are scratch marks on the trees on both sides, indicating a fierce battle. Anduin carefully examined the surrounding traces, focusing on the broken branches and claw marks on the trees. These paw prints differ from those of a hippogriff, and there are no bite marks. It seems the target creature primarily uses its claws for attacks. The height of the scratches suggests a large creature, but the size of the scratches indicates it might not be that big. Perhaps it uses jump attacks? Based on the scene, Anduin inferred that the target should be a medium-sized creature weighing no more than 300 kilograms. It has powerful forelimbs with 4 or more fingers, agile movements, and good jumping ability. The number of creatures is unknown. First of all, it is certain that it is not a dragon. Suspected targets include chimeras, cat leopards, werewolves, wetland werewolves, sack leopards, manticores, griffins, etc. The next step is to find a way to locate it. Anduin turned his gaze to the bloodstain again, noticing 2 separate moving traces and the smell of blood mist splitting into 2 directions. One of them leads to the outside of the forbidden forest. It seems to be the hippogriff's escape route, but the hippogriff should have been seriously injured. Why didn't the attacker continue to pursue it? Upon further inspection, Anduin found that the aura and traces of the hippogriff extended for more than 10 meters before floating directly into the air. It seems the hippogriff endured the pain and flew away, allowing it to escape. This means the attacking party has no flying ability, ruling out flying creatures such as the griffon. Anduin returned to the scene and examined the other trace, which appeared to be the route the target creature took when it left. The creature's body was contaminated with the blood and breath of the hippogriff, making the traces relatively clear. Cautiously, Anduin began to explore along this path. After a while, the footprints on the ground were either covered by fallen leaves or destroyed by other creatures. He could only follow the bloody scent forward. These traces were intermittent and weakened, causing significant trouble for his exploration. However, with persistence, he finally made progress. After exploring another kilometer, Anduin stopped behind a large tree. What is this? Anduin squatted down, pawing at the fallen leaves on the ground with his hands, and then twisted a bunch of hair to examine it. The target should have rested here. Anduin examined the hair closely, noting the dark color and the bloodstains. These marks are heavy, and the remaining hair is dark N color. There are still bloodstains on it, he observed. Huh? No, Anduin corrected himself, scrutinizing the blood. This isn't the blood of a hippogriff. The tracking spell didn't respond to it, which means the target was actually injured. He continued his analysis. No other hair or blood samples were found at the scene of the battle. It seems the target was only slightly injured or has a strong self-healing ability. Anduin pondered for a moment. The attacker can be preliminarily identified as a werewolf, possibly one from the wetlands. However, werewolves in the wetlands mainly live in the Americas, so this must be a local werewolf. But why would they appear near the periphery of Hogwarts? It doesn't matter. I need to find out whether it's a native werewolf or a werewolf patient. If it's a native werewolf that lives entirely in its werewolf form, it will be troublesome and must be resolved as soon as possible. Having made his judgment, Anduin cast a trace-finding spell on the hair. New clues began to emerge, and in his vision, a gray light mist appeared like a transparent ribbon, extending from the tree where he stood into the depths of the forbidden forest. There were many traces of other creatures' activities around, each contaminated with the target's scent, creating a mixture of various strange smells that interfered with the tracking. To address this, Anduin used an echo spell to scan the surrounding area, eliminating some incorrect scents. He also used the tracking spell on the blood of the hippogriff and the target, more or less locking in the direction of the target's travel. Following these remaining traces, Anduin ventured deeper into the forest. Along the way, he discovered traces of other magical creatures and many wild herbs. He couldn't resist harvesting the herbs, feeling that this trip to the Forbidden Forest was already worthwhile, regardless of the final outcome. As he followed the traces left by the attacker, time passed until he reached a river several meters wide. The clues end here, and there are no signs along the sides of the river. Did the target cross this river? Anduin frowned, feeling troubled. The river had cut off all traces of the attacker. If the werewolf had waded across, the water would likely have diluted the scent, making it uncertain whether there would be any clues on the other side. And if the werewolf had swum along the river, it would be even more challenging to track. End of this chapter. Chapter 211, Clues. After crossing the river, take the crossing point as the center. If you can find clues, continue. If you don't have any clues, you can only go back the same way. After making the plan, Anduin cast the floating technique without hesitation and crossed the river. They had now penetrated deep into the hinterland of the Forbidden Forest. No one could answer how big the Forbidden Forest next to Hogwarts truly was. Anduin checked the time. It was almost evening. In this case, he could only seize the remaining daylight to try and find some clues. Anduin placed a tracking amulet at the river crossing point as a marker, and then began a thorough search centered around it. Initially, he explored downstream of the river. If he were the werewolf, he might move downstream after crossing the river. But after half an hour of fan-shaped searching, neither the trace spell nor the echo spell found anything, which left him a little discouraged. However, adhering to the principle of thoroughness, he apparated back to the original location and then began to search upstream. During the 2 months back at Hogwarts, with the assistance of Professor Flitwick, Anduin had finally mastered the magic of apparition. This was why he dared to explore the Forbidden Forest alone. It ensured he could quickly escape in the event of any uncontrollable situation. Unexpectedly, Anduin found something after searching in this direction for less than a kilometer. He discovered traces of a fight in an open space not far away. No, this might not be considered a fight, but a hunt. A wild deer was disemboweled and lay on the ground in a miserable state. There were large claw marks on its neck and torso, which matched the werewolf scratches Anduin had discovered before. The deer carcass was about 10 meters away from the river's water source. Near the river, Anduin detected the werewolf scent again. Although it was very weak, it was still there. It seems that the target came ashore after swimming a certain distance upstream. No wonder there are no clues near the crossing point. The degree of decomposition of the corpse is within a day, but the werewolf attacked the hippogriff 2 days ago. That means this werewolf stayed here for a while to rest, then found a wild deer, and continued to move after hunting and eating. It seems the target is not far away. This discovery gave Anduin a lot of confidence. The information he collected along the way showed that the werewolf seemed irrational, and its movements were very erratic, often darting left and right. So this werewolf might not be far away from him in a straight line, and it seemed there was hope to catch it within the day. Anduin had been very persistent since he discovered that the target was a werewolf. On one hand, to ensure the safety of the outskirts of the Forbidden Forest, as this kind of irrational werewolf would pose a great threat if left alone. At the same time, he also hoped to enrich his living material library by capturing a werewolf. He was very curious about this highly contagious creature. However, after making a new discovery, he didn't rush to catch up. Instead, he carefully explored the surroundings. For dangerous creatures like werewolves, he had to be more cautious. And soon, Anduin discovered a suspicious point. On the dead deer, Anduin accidentally found a broken arrow. After removing the arrow, it was clear that this was not a modern bow and arrow style, but a very traditional handicraft. Could it be? Other than werewolves, were there others hunting this wild deer at that time? This arrowhead is bulky and doesn't seem to be the size commonly used by humans. Could it be that there are centaurs around here? This discovery raised Anduin's vigilance. The centaurs near Hogwarts were not friendly. They were very xenophobic, refused the approach of humans, and regarded the entire Forbidden Forest as their own territory. He would occasionally hear Hagrid was sharing stories about his interactions with the centaurs. From his descriptions, it was clear that most centaurs were very hostile towards wizards, with only a few willing to communicate with humans. The wizarding world's attitude towards centaurs was also quite awkward. On one hand, centaurs were classified as beings, but on the other, a centaur liaison office had been established within the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, which the centaurs found provocative. Hey, let's follow up and see the situation first. If the werewolf is killed by the centaurs, then we should hurry back and avoid any conflict with them as much as possible. Otherwise, entering the Forbidden Forest in the future will be a nightmare, Anduin suggested. Initially, Anduin thought the werewolf was the only concern, but now it seemed there were also centaurs with unknown intentions. He decided to proceed cautiously, following the trail captured by his tracking spell. Unlike before, the werewolf's path seemed more deliberate this time. Although there were some twists and turns, it generally moved in a fixed direction, as if something was drawing it that way. Anduin couldn't understand why the werewolf had suddenly changed its behavior, but he sensed something unusual and quickened his pace. After another hour of pursuit, Anduin felt he was getting closer. He could clearly see the werewolf's footprints, which alternated between bipedal and quadrupedal walking, resembling the original werewolf form rather than a person infected with lycanthropy. However, as the distance closed, the sun began to set, making it clear he wouldn't make it back before dark. Anduin used his message amulet to inform Hagrid that he was safe but wouldn't be returning that night. He then continued his pursuit with renewed vigor. As he got closer, he discovered more surprising clues. Other footprints appeared near the tracking path. Upon closer inspection, he confirmed they were horseshoe prints, and there were several of them. It seemed that centaurs were indeed involved, but to his surprise, the horseshoe prints were ahead, and the werewolf's footprints were moving towards them. In other words, was the werewolf chasing the centaurs? But centaurs were formidable fighters, and there were more than one of them. They were not known to flee from a werewolf. A reasonable yet irrational thought crossed Anduin's mind. Could the werewolf be following the centaurs? But why would it dare to do so? With many questions swirling in his mind, Anduin quickened his pace again. This time, he didn't need the tracking spell. He simply followed the footprints at a run. As he drew closer, Anduin soon discovered something even more surprising. End of this chapter. Chapter 212. The werewolf footprint increases. On the advancing route of the werewolf and the centaur, Anduin discovered several new werewolf footprints merging into the path he was tracking. To his surprise, he also found human footprints among them. Realizing the significance of this discovery, Anduin stopped at the place where the two werewolf teams converged and began a thorough investigation. He activated the non-locking mode of his tracing spell, revealing that the group of werewolves who had joined came directly from the depths of the nearby woods and quickly followed the lone werewolf. From the footprints, he estimated that there were roughly 4 werewolves, all moving in wolf form like the previous lone werewolf. Additionally, there were human footprints, indicating a tall male wearing shoes. Are the humans walking with the werewolves infected with lycanthropy? Are they companions or a leader? Anduin pondered. If the follow-up werewolves were part of the same group as the lone werewolf and were commanded by a leader, the situation could be more complex than he initially thought. Under the observation of his trace-finding spell, Anduin also detected strong traces of blood energy along the route the werewolves had taken. Did these werewolves engage in another battle before coming here, or were they just hunting? Should we follow this trail to investigate, or continue tracking the centaur? Anduin was conflicted. Chasing directly with limited information could be risky, especially if there were more werewolves than anticipated. It would be safer to investigate the origin of this group of werewolves first, potentially gathering useful information, such as their ability to use magic spells or the presence of additional companions. With a plan in mind, Anduin buried another locating amulet at the intersection to facilitate direction identification later and as a potential apparition point. He then turned around and followed the route the werewolves had come from. To improve efficiency, Anduin activated the all-terrain and acceleration functions of his phase shoes, moving nimbly through the woods. He sometimes jumped on treetops and rocks, quickly scanning the surroundings with his eyes. After traveling rapidly for about 2 or 3 kilometers, he noticed the blood traces growing stronger, indicating he was approaching the werewolves' fighting or hunting scene. Anduin slowed down, cautious of potential enemies, and released a few ravens to scout ahead. Advancing another kilometer, Anduin finally found the source of the blood energy through the shared vision of the ravens. In a large area of bushes among various trees, a fragmented figure lay collapsed in an open space, blood splattering the ground and staining the surrounding leaves scarlet. Wooden fragments scattered beside the figure suggested a smashed wooden box. Seeing this, Anduin didn't rush forward. Instead, he used the crime scene as the center and arranged the ravens to investigate carefully. His caution paid off. In the bushes more than 10 meters away from the dead body, he found a gap that didn't appear naturally formed. It seemed to have been blasted out by a thunderbolt explosion. Surrounding this gap, further exploration revealed. I noticed something hidden under a bush not far away. With this new discovery, I quickly controlled a raven to fly down and investigate. Is that a house elf? Anduin muttered, surprised by the image transmitted through his shared vision. A house elf, dressed in rags and covered in dust, lay unconscious under the bushes. It was clear the elf was not dead, just passed out. Seeing a living being at the scene, Anduin hurried over, hoping it might answer some of his questions. Upon reaching the elf, he turned it over and checked its nose with his fingers. The elf was indeed alive, but its body was covered in bruises and scratches. Although the bleeding was minimal, the injuries were severe for an elf. If not treated quickly, it might not survive. Anduin swiftly took out a nourishing potion and carefully fed it to the elf. Simultaneously, he cast a healing spell to mend its wounds. After a while, the elf's breathing became steady and strong. The constant movement of its eyeballs under its eyelids indicated it was about to wake up. "Wake up, elf. Can you hear me?" Anduin called out softly after giving it some water. "Master, no, help!" The elf muttered weakly at first. As its consciousness returned, its expression turned to one of fear. Suddenly, it opened its eyes wide and began shouting for help. "Help, master! Kiki is scared! Don't kill me! Don't hurt master! Help!" The now awake elf screamed louder, trembling and looking at Anduin with terrified eyes. "Don't be afraid. Your name is Kiki, right? I'm not a bad person. Please don't shout," Anduin said in a calm, deep voice, trying to comfort the elf. However, the elf continued to babble incoherently, ignoring Anduin's reassurances. Tears streamed down its face, showing its overwhelming fear. "Shut up!" Anduin yelled, frustrated by the elf's panic. He released a fear spell, and a wave of heart-pounding magic radiated from him. The effect was immediate. The elf fell silent with a quack sound, its tears stopping as its mind went blank from fear. This was the first time Anduin had used the fear spell on a humanoid creature. He wondered if the house elf's timidity made the spell more effective. He even worried he might have scared it to death. Now, let me ask, and you answer. Understand? Anduin said sternly. Yes, please, don't kill me, the elf stammered, trembling and clasping its hands together. What's your name? Anduin asked in a more relaxed tone. End of this chapter. Chapter 213, The Black Market Merchant. Chi-Chi, my name is Chi-Chi, my lord, the little elf replied obediently. Why did you appear here? And what happened? Anduin asked, seeing that the elf had finally calmed down. Chi-Chi came here to do business with the master. We walked through the forest for a day and a night, and then. Chi-Chi's voice trembled as she spoke, her expression turning frightened again. Don't be nervous, Chi-Chi. I won't hurt you. Just tell me what happened to you and your master in the Forbidden Forest. Anduin reassured her, squatting down to meet her eye level. Chi-Chi and the master finally reached the trading place. Many scary monsters surrounded us and attacked the master. The master told Chi-Chi to run, so Chi-Chi ran. Then Chi-Chi felt a lot of pain and doesn't remember anything after that. Where is the master? Chi-Chi's thoughts were jumbled, and she spoke in a disjointed manner. However, Anduin managed to piece together some information from her words. Take your time. I'll ask you one question at a time, and you can answer slowly, Anduin said, offering her a bottle of tranquilizer. After she drank it, her face softened. Did you have an appointment with someone? Anduin asked. Chi-Chi doesn't know. Chi-Chi only follows the master. The master didn't leave after we arrived, as if waiting for someone, Chi-Chi replied more fluently. Was it a pack of werewolves who came to meet your master? People who look like wolves but walk on 2 feet? Yes, it was that kind of monster. Werewolves. But at first, Chi-Chi saw a human wizard. He was talking to the master while Chi-Chi was looking at the cargo box. Then the wizard got angry and yelled, sounding like a wolf howling. After that, many werewolves appeared. And your master told you to run away? Not at first. The wizard came over, snatched the cargo box, and rummaged through it. Then he got even angrier and yelled at the master. That's when the master told Chi-Chi to run, so Chi-Chi ran. Were there other humans besides that wizard? How many werewolves were there? There was only one wizard, but many werewolves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Chi-Chi counted on her fingers until she reached 6. Anduin frowned, puzzled. He had only seen 5 sets of footprints earlier. Where was the 6th werewolf? Do you remember what the wizard said to your master? Anduin asked, keeping his doubts to himself. Chi-Chi remembers the wizard was very fierce. He asked the master why there was no living hell potion, only sleeping potion, and why the amount of volatile potion was insufficient. He said they needed it to bring down the unicorns. But the master had already tried very hard. The herbs needed for those potions were not available, Chi-Chi said, her voice growing aggrieved. Bring down the unicorns? Are they targeting unicorns? Anduin asked, his curiosity piqued. Chi-Chi doesn't know. The wizard started attacking the master after seeing the cargo box. Then he seemed to hear something and drew his wand. That's when the master told Chi-Chi to run, Chi-Chi explained. From this, Anduin deduced that Chi-Chi's master was a black market dealer selling potions. They had arranged a deal with the werewolf wizard, but the goods provided did not meet the wizard's needs. The wizard might have heard a signal from a lone werewolf, which was why he drew his wand. This place was only a few kilometers from the meeting point. It was indeed possible to hear the unique howling from the room. After that, the werewolf wizard seemed ready to betray his allies. He likely cast a thunderbolt explosion, which severely injured Chi-Chi as she tried to escape, and also killed the black market merchant. The werewolves didn't finish off Chi-Chi, perhaps because they were short on time. Anduin doubted a house elf could survive such a powerful spell. What puzzled Anduin was the black market dealer's apparent sympathy. Even in such a dire situation, he remembered to tell his house elf to run first. Anduin looked at Chi-Chi again. Did your master treat you well? He asked. The master is very kind to Chi-Chi, she replied, nodding. The master only beats Chi-Chi once every 5 days, and there is a meal every day, 1 meal a day. Anduin was speechless for a moment. You call that being nice to you? He thought. Then a question came to his mind. Your master told you to run. Why didn't you use apparition? Don't you know that magic? I remember that although house elves aren't rich in magic power, they are one of the rare races that can cast spells without a wand. Chi-Chi can apparate, she said, tilting her head and staring at him with her large eyes. Usually, Chi-Chi takes her master's followers to Apparat on the road, but at that time, the master told Chi-Chi to run, not to Apparat. Anduin understood. The black market dealer probably wanted Chi-Chi to Apparat and take his entourage with her, but Chi-Chi took his command literally and just ran away. Anduin recalled the scene of the corpse. The black market dealer had fallen facing the direction of the explosive curse. He likely intended to pounce on Chi-Chi and have her take him away, but she misunderstood and ran off, leaving him to his fate. By the way, sir, do you know where Chi-Chi's master is? Chi-Chi misses her master, she said, finally calming down as she sensed Anduin didn't mean her any harm. Your master, Anduin hesitated, recalling the corpse he hadn't yet examined closely. He looked into Chi-Chi's big round eyes and felt a pang of sympathy. All right, I'll take you to see him. He moved the body that had been covering Chi-Chi's face, revealing the tragic scene behind it. Master, master? Is this the master? Chi-Chi staggered to the shattered corpse, recognizing the somewhat familiar body and the beloved cargo box next to it. Tears welled up in her eyes. Anduin stood beside her, needing to examine the scene once more. Chapter 214, Fantastic Creature Smuggler. On the corpse at the scene, Anduin observed several claw marks. A large piece of flesh had been bitten off the neck and abdomen. Simultaneously, there were traces of a cutting curse on the back. The spell attack had caused severe damage, and then the victim was tortured to death by the werewolf. Even for Anduin, it was the first time witnessing such a cruel killing method. No wonder the wizarding world harbored such hostility towards werewolves. After inspecting the corpse, Anduin picked up the wreckage of the cargo box nearby. Most of the pieces were covered in dirt, indicating that Chi-Chi had cleaned up thoroughly. However, amidst the large wreckage of small shelves, there were also small drawers scattered across the floor. After collecting these small drawers, he found that although they had been emptied, there were still some residues left inside. Anduin picked up some of the residues, brought them to his nose, and recognized the herbs. There's wormwood, an ingredient in the Living Hell's potion, but no daffodil root powder to accompany it. There's also lavender, flobberworm slime, and valerian, which are herbs for sleeping potions. It seems Chi-Chi didn't lie to me, Anduin muttered to himself. He then used a tracing spell to investigate the scene, and it matched what Chi-Chi had described, a human footprint and 6 werewolves. According to the movement trajectory, the human led 5 werewolves towards him. However, one of the werewolves ran in another direction. Judging by the depth of the footprints, the werewolf was advancing at full speed on 4 legs, running very fast. Was it going to call its companions, or was it assigned another task? Anduin frowned as he pondered the clues left behind. Before he could think for long, he was interrupted by the sound of bang bang from the side. He saw Chi-Chi standing next to a big tree, tears streaming down her cheeks, banging her head against the trunk, and shouting as she did so. Chi-Chi is useless. Chi-Chi is a house elf without a master. Why is Chi-Chi so stupid and failed to protect her master? Damn Chi-Chi, she cried out. After finishing, she picked up a sharp stone from the ground, pointed it at her head, hesitated for a moment, and then attempted to hit herself with it. Ping! A magic spell suddenly appeared, and the sharp stone in Chi-Chi's hand was thrown away. Anduin walked towards her with an angry expression. What are you doing? Your master is dead, and instead of seeking revenge, you want to commit suicide? Are you a coward? Anduin said angrily. But Chi-Chi can't beat those monsters, and Chi-Chi has no owner. Chi-Chi is useless. The master said that useless beings should die, Chi-Chi wailed loudly, sitting on the ground. Hearing this, Anduin thought to himself that her master didn't seem like a good person. He looked at the heartbroken Chi-Chi in front of him, speechless. Anduin despised those who didn't strive to improve themselves, so he couldn't understand creatures like house elves, who had no self-esteem at all. While he was distracted, Chi-Chi stood up again and tried to self-mutilate, which made Anduin angry. He immediately picked up Chi-Chi to stop her behavior. Despite his intervention, Chi-Chi cowardly begged for mercy. Master Wizard, please let me die. Chi-Chi's owner is gone. Chi-Chi is nothing without a master, and Chi-Chi's beloved cargo box is gone. Please do me a favor, Mr. Wizard, she pleaded. Stop arguing. From now on, you will follow me. You can't die without my permission. You will still be useful for a while. Now accompany me to chase those werewolves, Anduin commanded. What? Are you willing to let the humble Cheeky follow you, Master Wizard? Are you willing to take Cheeky and be Cheeky's master? Cheeky suddenly became agitated upon hearing Anduin's words and stared blankly at him. Think whatever you want, Anduin replied, curling his lips at Cheeky's sudden change in attitude. Yes, master, you ordered me to kill Kiki. Do you need Kiki to find you a cane? Kiki looked at Anduin excitedly. No one wants to beat you. Clean up quickly. I'll bury your master first. I'll be busy later, Anduin replied, unable to comprehend the elf's thought process. I'm sorry, master. It's Kiki who is useless. She didn't understand what master wants, Kiki said, kicking a stone beside her and hopping in pain. Anduin sighed, knelt down, and looked at her. Kiki. Kiki is here. Master, please tell me, she responded quickly, baring her teeth. You are not allowed to harm yourself in the future, do you understand? Anduin said sternly. I'm sorry, master. It's Kiki who made a mistake, she said, tears welling up in her eyes. She was about to break her own fingers, but Anduin's glare stopped her. She stood cautiously in place. Seeing this, Anduin could only shake his head helplessly. He didn't know how to handle Kiki's situation, but if he ignored her, she might harm herself. He ordered Kiki to stay by the side and quickly buried the body of the black market businessman. Leaving a human corpse in the wilderness was not an option. Afterwards, he picked up Kiki and apparated back to the fork in the road. The path split into two. One route was taken by most of the werewolves, and the other by a lone werewolf. Anduin pondered which route to pursue. The lone werewolf was fast and had an unknown target, while the group of werewolves was chasing a centaur, led by a werewolf wizard. In the end, Anduin decided to follow the larger group to assess the situation. Based on the information he had gathered, it seemed the werewolves were in the Forbidden Forest for the unicorns. This was likely the initial goal of the werewolf wizard, which made Anduin think of magical creature smugglers. From Moody, he learned that smuggling businesses in the British wizarding world were rampant, with more illegal activities than legitimate ones. The werewolves on the outskirts of the Forbidden Forest were likely the vanguard, attacking magical biomes due to their unruly nature. When he found the centaur, he followed it and notified the werewolf wizard through a signal. They had bought sleeping potions like living hell decoction to capture creatures alive, but now only had lower-grade sleeping potions. Although the hypnotic effect was decent, it wasn't effective on magical creatures like unicorns with strong magic resistance. With no trace of the unicorns found, it was highly probable that the werewolf wizard would shift his target to the centaur troops ahead. Chapter 215, Shimmering Cloak. After understanding the situation, Anduin tucked Chi-Chi under his arm and sprinted along the path taken by the werewolves. By now, the sun had completely set, and only a crescent moon provided some light, though its faint glow couldn't penetrate the dense forest. The land was almost invisible, filled with the smell of decay, dead leaves, and animal excrement. The whistling wind and the hoarse, inexplicable bird calls added to the sense of horror and loneliness. Despite the eerie environment, Anduin ran at an extremely fast pace, deftly navigating around trees, stones, pits, and gentle slopes. He moved swiftly through the forest, but Cheeky, who was clutched under his arm, was far from calm. She felt the gusts of wind hitting her cheeks, making it almost impossible to open her eyes. She trembled with fright. Master, it's too scary. It feels like ghosts are staring at us. Help! Cheeky couldn't stand it anymore and shouted loudly. Don't be afraid. What you see are the eyes of night owls. Stop talking. It will only expose our position. Understand? Anduin warned in a deep voice. Yes, master. Although Cheeky was trembling with fear, she faithfully obeyed Anduin's order, covering her mouth tightly with her little hand. Anduin, who was chasing at high speed, relied on the echo spell and the tracking spell to keep close to the werewolves. The bloody smell in the air and the clearly visible footprints on the ground indicated that he was not far behind them. To avoid detection, Anduin did not use any lighting, and he activated the silent module of his running shoes. Now, he was like a silent ghost, gradually closing in on his targets. This relentless high-speed pursuit had lasted for more than an hour, covering at least a dozen kilometers when Anduin finally spotted the werewolves. He immediately stopped, causing Chi-Chi, who was under his arm, to feel dizzy from the sudden halt. Master? Chi-Chi asked in a cautious whisper. Shh! Anduin put a finger to his lips, signaling her to stay quiet. He then gently set Chi-Chi down and extended his index and middle fingers, pressing them against the front of his robe and stroking downward lightly. A faint magical wave emanated from the robe, spreading a subtle aura from the neck to the entire garment. Chi-Chi, who was close by, could only faintly see the robe shimmering with the aura, revealing dense and strange lines. "Okay, Chi-Chi, you can talk now, but stay close to me, no more than a meter away. Otherwise, the werewolf's keen sense of smell and hearing might detect us." "Yes, master." Chi-Chi nodded obediently, then looked at Anduin with some confusion. "But what was that just now? You're talking about this?" Anduin pointed to his robe and smiled slightly. "This is the shimmering cloak. Once activated, it can block sound and smell within a meter of me and cast a disillusionment spell within that range. With this, they won't be able to find us." "Wow, master, you're amazing. I've never seen such a magical treasure from the old master," Chi-Chi said, her eyes lighting up with admiration. "It's not a big deal. Its invisibility doesn't last as long as an invisibility cloak, but it works as long as I regularly replenish the illusion spell. Let's not dwell on that. Quickly regain some strength. We'll observe the werewolf's actions and act accordingly." Anduin took out 2 pieces of jerky from his pocket and handed one to Chi-Chi. "Is this meat?" "Chi-Chi is not worthy of eating meat," Chi-Chi said hesitantly. In the past, Chi-Chi could only eat meat once a year, Chi-Chi said nervously after taking the jerky. "Stop talking nonsense and eat quickly," Anduin scolded, glaring at Chi-Chi before chewing on his own piece of jerky. "Yes, master. The master is so kind to Chi-Chi," Chi-Chi replied, tears welling up in her eyes as she stuffed the jerky, which was larger than her palm, into her mouth. Taking advantage of the moment, Anduin used an echo spell to probe the situation ahead. Earlier, he had noticed dense noises coming from the front, and the stench of werewolves was unmistakable, even without a tracer spell. After a few quick bites of food and water, Anduin picked up Chi-Chi and leaped high, landing on the trunk of a large tree. He then ascended the trunk like a ninja. Reaching a certain height, he kicked off again, jumping from one tree to another, repeating the process several times to approach the source of the noise from above. After a few jumps, Anduin and Chi-Chi settled on the trunk of a large tree. Although they were more than 10 meters from the ground, they could clearly hear the commotion not far ahead. About 50 meters away, there were roars of werewolves and the buzzing sounds of centaurs releasing their bowstrings. The thick branches and the dark night obscured the specific details of the scene. "It seems the 2 sides have engaged in battle," Anduin observed, putting Chi-Chi down. "Can you see the wizard who killed your master?" "No, master. It's too dark, and the trees are blocking the view," Chi-Chi replied, shaking her head in frustration. "I'm sorry, master. Is Chi-Chi very useless?" "Don't say such discouraging things," Anduin warned sternly, picking her up again. "Let's get closer. Be careful not to make any noise." He jumped again, moving among the large trees, advancing tens of meters before landing on a tree with a wide view. The battle was taking place in an open space ahead. The first thing that caught the eye was the centaurs holding torches. Their stature was very conspicuous, averaging 3 meters tall. There were about 7 or 8 of them, but 3 were shorter and beardless, indicating they were young centaurs. They were in a low-lying open space with a radius of tens of meters. Behind them and to their left were rocky highlands 3 to 4 meters high. The path seemed deliberately obstructed, with tree trunks cut off by magic spells. Anduin and Chi-Chi were on a tree on this side, possibly benefiting from the cleared view due to the cut-off trees. End of this chapter. Chapter 2:16, The Elder's Prophecy. Directly opposite the centaurs stood a group of werewolves, fully displaying their wolf forms. Among them, a figure resembling a human wizard was clustered in the center. His dense black hair and fangs, which did not match those of ordinary humans, were exposed on his face. Facing these werewolves, the centaur team leaned against a huge rock, forming 2 rows. 5 adult centaurs stood in the front, with 3 in the middle holding spears. The 2 on the sides and the 3 young centaurs in the back row held bows and arrows, tensely poised with their bows drawn. Despite the tension, the werewolves did not rush forward to start the battle. They were evidently aware of the centaurs' powerful archery skills. Many of the werewolves still had broken arrows embedded in their bodies, and sporadic bloodstains marked the ground. However, the centaurs were not in good condition either. The front row centaurs bore scratch-like wounds and were visibly exhausted. One centaur was seriously injured, his hands trembling as he struggled to hold the bowstring. The werewolves had cleverly cornered the centaurs, preventing them from escaping. It was well known that once centaurs started running, even a werewolf sprinting at full speed couldn't catch up. The situation suggested that the two sides had already clashed several times, but the centaurs had yet to find a way to break through the encirclement. Meanwhile, the werewolves were unable to decisively defeat them, resulting in a stalemate. This stalemate was particularly disadvantageous for the centaurs, as werewolves possessed strong self-healing abilities. Anduin, observing from the sidelines, noticed a werewolf pulling an arrow from his shoulder, the wound already beginning to heal. The battlefield's dynamic power was clearly in the werewolves' favor. Anduin made a new discovery. The number of werewolves did not match his initial count. Including the lone werewolf he had been chasing and the 5 werewolves plus 1 werewolf wizard who had joined the pursuit, there should have been 7. However, his echo spell revealed that there were as many as 11 werewolves participating in the siege. 2 of them had even sneaked around to the high ground behind the centaurs, waiting for an opportunity. It seems the werewolf who left the scene did indeed summon reinforcements, Anduin noted, glancing at Cheeky. Is that wizard the one you encountered before? Yes, master, that's him, Chi-Chi confirmed after a quick look. But there weren't as many werewolves around him then as there are now. Anduin nodded. It appeared there were no other lycanthropy wizards. This werewolf wizard was likely the leader of the group. After locating the target, he had sent a werewolf to gather more companions. It seemed there were quite a few werewolves searching for unicorns in the Forbidden Forest. If one of them hadn't happened to run to the outskirts, Anduin might never have known about it. Anduin had no intention of letting these werewolves go, but he decided to assess the situation first. Rushing in without understanding the werewolves' combat abilities and physical fitness could lead to unnecessary risks. Despicable poacher, shouted a bearded centaur in the center, who appeared to be an elder. He directed his anger at the werewolf wizard. We should have heeded the celestial omens. After Betelgeuse and Orion dimmed, the werewolves inexplicably expanded their range of activities. It must be a sign. The werewolf wizard licked his sharp teeth and sneered. Ha! Foolish old horses, I advise you to surrender. I only want those bright-colored ponies behind you. As for you, the old and tough meat, I'll eat it without hesitation. You. The horsemen in front were furious at the werewolf wizard's words. The 3 young men behind them angrily shot a few more arrows. But the werewolf wizard didn't even draw his wand. He simply pushed the arrows away with his sharp-nailed hands. You are so brave, daring to challenge us, the elder centaur said, gripping his spear tightly and pointing it at the werewolf wizard. I advise you to leave immediately, or disaster will befall you werewolves. Humph, old fool, your bluff is useless. I haven't attacked you hard because I don't want to damage the furs of those ponies. Damaged goods don't sell for much. My patience is running thin, so don't waste my kindness, the werewolf wizard snorted coldly. A cruel and despicable werewolf showing mercy? What a joke. What else do you do besides killing and polluting? Mocked another centaur, holding a spear beside the elder. The werewolf wizard was visibly enraged by the centaur's words. He bared his teeth and glared viciously. Does the turtle in the urn dare to underestimate the proud wolves? Sooner or later, I will breed more werewolves and create an invincible army that will make the magical world tremble. When that time comes, it will be the end of your kind. You will become prey, and we will be the hunters. Aren't you good at prophecy? Predict your doom. The horsemen trembled with anger at the werewolf wizard's vicious and cruel curse. Some even broke formation, ready to rush forward and finish off the damned werewolf at any moment. But the centaur elder calmly stopped his companions. He looked up at the sky for a moment, then turned his calm gaze to the werewolf leader. Run away, despicable werewolves. The wrath of thunder is about to greet you. I have received a revelation. The messenger from the 7th star of the Big Dipper will bring about your death. After tonight, Only 2 of your kind will see the sun of tomorrow, the centaur elder said in a flat tone. Ha ha ha! Enough with the jokes. You've exhausted my patience. Since you like stars so much, I'll send you to meet them. The werewolf leader took out his wand with his right hand and grabbed a handful of test tubes filled with liquid with his left. He squeezed the test tubes hard and waved his wand. The liquid from the test tubes transformed into a large cloud of water vapor, which the werewolf wizard controlled to float towards the centaurs. No, it's a sleeping potion. Seeing this, the centaur soldiers panicked. End of this chapter. Chapter 217, Eye of the Storm. Master, those in his hand are the sleeping pills he stole from us, Chi-Chi said excitedly after seeing the test tube taken out by the werewolf wizard. Anduin nodded casually and then fell into deep thought. His mind was not on the werewolf wizard now. What concerned him more was the prophecy spoken by the elder centaur. The messenger of the 7th star of the Big Dipper, the fury from thunder. Is this referring to me? He pondered. He knew that his current position was indeed north of the centaurs. Could the centaur really have predicted his intervention? Is prophecy magic real in this world? In his habitual thinking, he had always considered prophecy magic to be too far-fetched. It was like the air in a potato chip package. You can't say it's not there, but you can't see it after opening the package. Now, someone had actually made a prophecy about him right in front of him, which piqued his curiosity about such things. When he took elective courses before, he didn't consider divination, mainly because many companions in the spell club told him that the divination class at Hogwarts was very bad. They said that Trelawney was very unreliable and would always make death predictions to students every year, none of which ever came true. If I just watch quietly like this and don't make a move, will the prophecy made by this centaur fail? Anduin thought with some mischievous humor. Master, look quickly. Those horsemen rushed up. Cheeky, who had been paying close attention to the scene, hurriedly shouted when she saw the change in the situation. Anduin, interrupted by Cheeky, also looked at the battle ahead. The centaurs were enveloped by the sleeping potion air mass produced by the werewolf wizard. As a race proficient in herbal medicine, they quickly recognized the effect of these potions. They knew they couldn't sit still, otherwise they would be stunned if they continued like this. So they organized a charge again, preparing to fight hard and try to break through. After seeing the actions of the centaurs, the werewolf wizard raised his head and let out a sharp wolf howl. The surrounding native werewolves rushed forward with red eyes and disgusting yellow saliva dripping from their mouths. For a while, the two sides fought fiercely. The centaur elder in the middle straightened his spear and charged straight at the werewolf wizard, seemingly planning a one-stroke beheading action. But the werewolf wizard grinned sneeringly when he saw this. He raised his wand and aimed at the centaur with a quick and hard curse. However, the elder centaur reacted swiftly, swinging his spear horizontally and deflecting the curse like a fly. It was unclear what his spear was made of, but its quality was impressive. Although this parry was executed beautifully, it also slowed down his running pace. The battle between the two became a back and forth of the werewolf wizard casting curses and the centaur elder deflecting them with his spear. Occasionally, the elder would stab back with his spear, but the werewolf wizard was agile enough to dodge the attacks. The two were locked in a stalemate, neither gaining the upper hand. However, the rest of the centaurs were in trouble. They had to face almost twice as many werewolves as their own, and there were 3 young centaurs among them. This caused their charge to be blocked almost immediately, forcing them into hand-to-hand combat with the werewolves. Fortunately, in addition to the weapons in their hands, their thick horseshoes were also very powerful. With the addition of bows and arrows and spears, they managed to severely injure 2 werewolves in the initial clash. Compared to the centaurs' powerful and straightforward attacks, the werewolves focused more on flexible and small-scale movements. They were not as good as the centaurs in long-distance running, but they were more agile in close combat. The centaur was clearly at a disadvantage in close combat. On the battlefield, it appeared as though the centaur was chasing the werewolf. But if the werewolf managed to evade, it would retaliate with a scratch, which was incredibly frustrating. Moreover, the endurance levels of the two sides were not comparable. After being struck by an arrow, a werewolf angrily bit off the arrow shaft with its teeth and charged forward again, howling loudly. Even a severely injured werewolf, after resting for a short while, could return to the battlefield. In contrast, each wound on a centaur weakened it further. Some centaurs were even stained red with their own blood. The sleeping potion cast by the werewolf wizard continued to take effect, causing some centaurs to feel dizzy. If this stalemate continued, it wouldn't be long before the centaurs would fall into decline. At the same time, two werewolves lying in ambush on the high ground behind made their move. They launched a sudden high-altitude attack on three young centaurs, biting off the large bows of two centaurs, leaving them weaponless. The werewolves clearly didn't want to kill these young centaurs or leave too many scars. To the werewolf wizards, they were prey to be captured and goods to be traded. Therefore, the werewolves aimed at the bows and arrows of the young centaurs, and after destroying them, they circled around to exhaust the centaurs' energy. The physical strength and magic resistance of the young centaurs were obviously not as strong as those of the mature ones, and their resistance to the sleeping potion was also weaker. After a while, one of the centaurs felt dizzy, his eyes twitching, looking as if he was about to fall asleep at any moment. Seeing the situation becoming critical, many centaurs grew anxious, and their attacks became more ferocious. They even used their large bows as melee weapons, swinging them frantically at the enemy, forcing the werewolves back temporarily. However, such desperate counterattacks left them more vulnerable and injured. The strenuous exercise also accelerated their blood flow, making the sleeping potion take effect faster. "Ha! Your prophecy seems to be failing you. Let your broken star go to hell, old man." The werewolf wizard taunted the elder centaur proudly, seeing the situation slowly tilting in their favor. The elder centaur was extremely anxious. He saw a young centaur already succumbing to the effects of the sleeping potion and collapsing. Could it be that something went wrong with his enlightenment, and the star of the morning no longer favored the centaurs? Anduin, who had been observing the battle, knew it was time to intervene. Although he was curious to see if the centaur elder's prophecy would come true, he couldn't let these cruel werewolves win so easily. It was infuriating. "Chichi, stay here and don't move. If you encounter danger, apparate away," Anduin instructed the elf. Then he drew his wand and leaped into action. Eye of the Storm. End of this chapter. Chapter 218, Electrostatic Pulse. After a period of observation, Anduin had formed a basic judgment on the physical fitness and resistance of the werewolves. Their magical and physical resistance were far superior to that of human wizards. Additionally, they possessed the advantages of rapid movement, quick reflexes, and swift melee attack speed. Coupled with the wolf virus, it was imperative not to be bitten by them. To effectively combat werewolves, the primary strategy was to prevent them from getting close. When facing a large number of werewolves, using area of effect magic was essential. With these considerations in mind, Anduin prioritized casting the Wild Thunder spell, Eye of the Storm, which he had developed recently. The Eye of the Storm was a new type of spell, optimized from the weather spell. At a height of 5 to 20 meters in the air, where his eyes focused, a thunderstorm cloud would form, condensing a thunderstorm core at its center. Targets within a radius of 10 to 30 meters from the center would be marked. Once within the attack range, the Eye of the Storm would release high-speed lightning with an attack frequency of less than once per second. The number of attacks, ranging from 20 to 50, depended on the amount of magic power injected. This spell was powerful and had a wide attack range, but it also had its drawbacks. It did not distinguish between friend and foe, except for the wizard who cast it. However, Anduin had his own methods to manage this. The werewolves and centaurs, who were fiercely battling, saw a wizard holding a wand leap down from the side. A cloud of sparkling electric sparks floated more than 10 meters above his head, heading straight for the battlefield. "Oh!" The nearest werewolf roared upon seeing Anduin, its scarlet, bloodthirsty eyes fixed on him, and then charged on all fours. Crack! Boom! The thundercloud above Anduin struck the werewolf that had just entered the range of the Eye of the Storm, sending a bolt of lightning. In an instant, the werewolf's hair was scorched black, and it was flung backward, the smell of burnt flesh filling the air. However, the werewolf's vitality was indeed formidable. After being struck by lightning, it rolled on the ground, struggled to its feet, and prepared to charge again. Shen Feng Wuying. Anduin didn't give it a chance. A swift and precise severing charm cut straight at the werewolf's neck. Swish! The invisible blade accurately sliced into the werewolf's neck, severing it in an instant and decapitating the werewolf. A werewolf was instantly killed in a single encounter. Witnessing this, everyone in the center of the battlefield, both friend and foe, seemed frozen in shock. "Hold on. The sign of the Morning Star has appeared. Rally to me and charge!" The Centaur Elder shouted excitedly upon seeing the thundercloud high in the sky. "Go to hell! No one can resist the fangs and claws of a werewolf. Stop that wizard!" The werewolf wizard growled at the remaining werewolves and then cast Avada Kedavra at the Centaur Elder. But Anduin's intervention had boosted the Centaur's morale. The Elder Centaur deflected the green light with a hard stab and led the Centaurs in another charge. However, the previous battles had greatly exhausted the Centaurs. 3 of them succumbed to the effects of the sleeping potion and fell. Despite adding a few more scars to their bodies, the charge still failed to break through. Following the werewolf wizard's order, 2 werewolves turned and ran towards Anduin. But by this time, Anduin was already close to the core of the battlefield. Facing the 2 werewolves, he prepared for the next phase of the battle. As the werewolves rushed towards him, Anduin ignored them and leaped straight into the center of the battlefield. "Static pulse!" he shouted, pointing his wand at the gathered centaurs. A powder blue light sphere began to expand in the center of the centaur group. The transparent magic shell of the sphere shimmered with electric light, and filaments of electricity connected the center to the shell. The surrounding centaurs were momentarily stunned, unable to react. Suddenly, the transparent electric ball exploded, causing a violent electric shock and a blinding flash of light that enveloped all the centaurs present. Anduin's actions left everyone bewildered. Wasn't he supposed to support the centaurs? Why was he casting a spell on them? Judging by the spell's light and shadow effects, it was clearly powerful. Even the werewolf wizard next to him was stunned. How much hatred did this wizard have for the centaurs to attack them amidst a bunch of werewolves? At the moment of the electric ball's explosion, even the Centaur Elder began to doubt his understanding. Could there be something wrong with the enlightenment he received? Why did the 7th messenger of the Big Dipper attack them instead of saving them? However, after the light ball exploded, the centaurs realized they were unharmed. Their fur stood on end, and occasional wisps of faint electric light streaked across their bodies. "Don't just stand there. You won't be accidentally injured by lightning now. Hurry up and get close to me, and tend to your wounded," Anduin reminded the bewildered centaurs. This static pulse spell was developed by Anduin to solve the problem of the Eye of the Storm spell, which didn't distinguish between friend and foe. As long as his enchanted electrostatic force field covered them, his subsequent range-type Wild Thunder spell would avoid targets with the force field. Upon hearing Anduin's words, the Elder Centaur quickly led the rest of the centaurs towards him. Sure enough, once within the range of the Eye of the Storm, they were not attacked. This change infuriated the werewolf wizard. Initially, he thought the wizard had a grudge against the centaurs, but it turned out he was there to oppose him. "Charge at them! Kill them all, no matter what!" The werewolf wizard howled, not caring about survival. The surrounding werewolves howled back and charged with bloodshot eyes. Anduin smiled coldly as he saw the werewolves rushing forward collectively. These creatures weren't entirely foolish. The Eye of the Storm attack frequency wasn't fast enough to hit multiple targets simultaneously, so attacking together was a smart strategy. But did they think he would just stand there idly? Thunderstorm Ball, Electric Shock Circuit. Anduin's left hand formed a virtual grip, closing with his right wand in front of his chest. The wand pointed to the palm of his left hand, and electric sparks arced between the wand's tip and his hand, gathering to form 5 ping-pong ball-sized micro-electric balls. End of this chapter. Chapter 219, Electric Shock Circuit. Anduin flicked his wand forward, and 5 thunderstorm balls formed a circle, spreading out in a ring shape to surround him and the team of centaurs. Although the werewolves were crazed and bloodthirsty, they were not fools. Seeing the magical electric balls, they knew better than to touch them. As the magic balls flew, the werewolves dodged smartly, moving to predetermined positions and staying put like wooden stakes. The werewolves who managed to avoid the magic balls continued to accelerate towards Anduin and the centaurs. However, as they passed between the 2 magic balls, a current loop instantly formed between them. The werewolves, moving at high speed, seemed to hit a metal tripwire or cross a high-heat beam. They were either forcibly bounced off by the electric current or caught in the middle and electrocuted. The werewolves caught in the middle of the linked current loop suffered the most. Paralyzed by the current, they couldn't move. One werewolf, hit while jumping in the air, was fixed in midair. Meanwhile, the women of the storm in the sky above joined in, striking lightning every now and then. In just a few seconds, one unlucky werewolf was struck 3 times in a row, his body completely carbonized by electricity. The final bolt of lightning shattered his upper body to pieces. "You idiots! Don't you know how to avoid the connection between those magic balls? Jump up and cross over!" The werewolf wizard shouted angrily at the remaining werewolves, seeing his companion struck to death by lightning. Realizing the danger, the rest of the werewolves attempted to jump over the current loop. But reality was not as easy as imagined. The 5 thunderstorm spheres were arranged in a 5-pointed star, forming not only an electric shock circuit between the outermost spheres, but also a connected circle inside the ring. This created a set of 5-star current loops. The combination spell was very flexible. At least 2 magic balls were enough to form a single loop current, but adding more balls exponentially increased the number of interconnected loops. The balls could be combined on a plane or even block the sky by staggering their heights. Anduin only used 5 balls to save mana. If he had used a lightning circle with more than a dozen magic balls, the enemy would have faced a return grid instead of a return line. Sure enough, many werewolves, after crossing the foremost electric current, rushed straight towards Anduin, but before they could run a few steps, they were hit by an oblique electric shock circuit. One werewolf was even hit by another circuit after being bounced, then knocked into the air again. It bounced back and forth between several circuits like a ball, creating a chaotic and almost comical scene. Meanwhile, after releasing the combination spell of Thunderstorm Ball and Electric Shock Circuit, Anduin was not idle. His body was full of magic power, and he launched attacks one by one at the werewolves controlled by the Electric Shock Circuit. The direct kill of the Electric Shock Circuit was not particularly strong, and the werewolves, rough skin and thick flesh, could only be paralyzed for a while. Anduin used the circuit more to compress their range of action and control, making it easier to aim. Cluster Lightning! Shenfeng Wuing! 2 fast and urgent spells were shot out one after another. After Anduin learned how to counter-curse, Shenfeng Wuing finally lifted the restrictions on its use, and its power did not disappoint, cutting off the head of a werewolf again. Cluster Lightning was a single-body spell that Anduin had developed a lethal spell that concentrated lightning energy to form a high-voltage impact, combining both speed and power. When cast, a silver-blue electric current shot out like a ribbon, striking a werewolf in the blink of an eye. The impact created a hole the size of a bowl in the werewolf's chest, with the edges of the wound charred to a crisp. In mere moments, 3 werewolves had been killed, including the one Anduin had decapitated earlier, bringing the total to 4. The werewolf wizard was furious. He quickly waved his wand and aimed at the nearest thunderstorm orb, knowing that it severely hampered the werewolf's mobility and needed to be destroyed. However, Anduin was not about to let him succeed easily. With a flick of his wand, he cast an iron armor curse over the thunderstorm orb. Although the explosion curse from the werewolf wizard destroyed the iron armor curse, the orb remained intact. After securing the magic ball, Anduin turned his attention back to the werewolves. He cast another Cluster Lightning spell, striking a werewolf trapped in the electric circuit array and tearing it apart. Anduin's decisiveness and ruthlessness instilled fear in the remaining werewolves, who hesitated to advance. They circled the electric loop, wary of Anduin's next move. Anduin was careful not to waste his energy on the werewolves, conserving his strength for the group battle. During this time, he and the werewolf wizard exchanged several rounds of spells. From the werewolf wizard's reactions and the power of his spells, Anduin realized that he couldn't easily defeat him. The werewolf wizard was much stronger than Avery, whom Anduin had previously bested. Given the werewolf's physical strength and speed, closing the distance of several meters to defeat him was a daunting task. "Human, why do you meddle in matters that don't concern you? Why do you protect these centaurs?" the werewolf wizard demanded, attempting to negotiate. "Do you know the consequences of provoking the werewolves? If you step aside and let us kill the centaurs, I can promise to let you go. Otherwise, you will face endless revenge from the werewolves." "I'm not here for the centaurs," Anduin sneered. "I don't care about the consequences of provoking werewolves, and I don't want to know. But since you've crossed my path, consider yourself unlucky." "Despicable poachers," shouted one of the centaur elders, who was half kneeling on the ground. Exhausted and weakened by sleeping pills, he could barely stand, leaning heavily on his spear. "Stop this madness. Your plot will not succeed. There's still time to escape, or death will be your only fate." Anduin was the first to react to the elder centaur's words. He turned and shot the elder a fierce look. He had been strategizing all day on how to capture the werewolf wizard, and the elder's outburst threatened to ruin his plans. If the werewolf wizard escaped, Anduin would not forgive the elder for jeopardizing his mission. End of this chapter. Chapter 220, Encountering the Mad Blood Potion Again. The main reason Anduin was willing to help the centaurs was that he knew the werewolves were targeting them. He used the centaurs as bait to lure the werewolves. If the werewolves scattered now, it would be difficult for him to chase them down. Additionally, Anduin had learned from Hagrid that he had a good relationship with some centaurs, so he decided to help them as well. However, the old centaur's direct approach to persuade him was unexpected. "Brother Werewolf, don't run away. I killed so many of your good brothers. It's inappropriate not to stay and take revenge," Anduin thought silently, glancing at the elder centaur with a mix of surprise and admiration. Was the old centaur using reverse psychology? It seemed Anduin was too young to fully grasp the elder's tactics. The furious werewolf leader gritted his teeth, took out a few more bottles of potion, and summoned all the werewolves to his side with a howl. He distributed the potions to the werewolves, who crushed the bottles and swallowed the contents without hesitation. Anduin quickly cast a few spells to try to stop them, but the distance was too great, and the werewolf wizard blocked all the attacks with consecutive iron armor spells. The expressions of the werewolves who swallowed the potion changed instantly. They raised their heads and let out long howls, scratching their bodies continuously with their claws. Even as they tore at their fur, the blood didn't stop flowing, as if something was running rampant inside them. It was excruciatingly painful. When they lowered their heads to face Anduin again, their expressions had transformed. The madness on their faces intensified, their pupils dilated to the extreme, their muscles bulged, and veins twitched visibly through their hair. Is this the crazy element or the mad blood potion? Anduin's face turned grim. He had seen the power of the blood rage potion before. It forcibly enhanced their physique and magic resistance, increasing their speed. These werewolves were already fast and agile. If not controlled in advance, it would be very difficult to hit them with spells. In the previous battle, the magic front wing he cast had been bypassed by a werewolf outside the circuit formation. He wasn't sure if the werewolves who used the potion could resist the impact of the electric shock circuit. "Turn," Anduin commanded, swinging his wand horizontally. The thunderstorm ball surrounding it began to rotate clockwise, slowly accelerating. This would increase the hit rate of some circuit circles, preventing the drugged werewolves from jumping over them. The werewolves, now completely crazed, had no reason left in their eyes. After a long howl, they charged forward, ignoring the electric shock circuit that had previously blocked them. This time, when the werewolves hit the current wire on the circuit, they endured the immense pain of the electric shock and the strong impact of the current. Although the electric shocks slowed them down, they pushed through with sheer determination. The lightning from the eye of the storm in the air, which would have sent the werewolves flying and caused serious injuries, now only made them pause slightly. Though it left hideous electric scars on their bodies, they seemed to have forgotten the feeling of pain and continued to rush forward. "Shen Feng Wu Ying," Anduin shouted, casting a spell just as the werewolves closed in. Anduin had just arrived when he cast two shadowless magic spells. One of the spells was dodged by the werewolf, whose enhanced reflexes allowed it to evade the attack. The other spell hit its mark but failed to penetrate the werewolf's tough hide. The werewolf tensed its muscles, effectively sealing the wound and stopping the bleeding. Realizing that it was too naive to think he could kill them with magic spells alone, Anduin shook his head and decided to take the fight more seriously. He raised his left hand and swiped it across his body, instantly summoning two metal amulets. With all his strength, he threw them forward. Next, he took out a metal sphere, which activated with a buzz and began to spin around him continuously. It resembled a silver version of the golden snitch, but without wings. Anduin then patted his waist, pulled out a long silver metal chain, and threw it forward. The chain transformed mid-air into a silver metal snake, twisting and writhing like a real serpent as it sprinted forward. This was the spirit-binding snake he had used before. Finally, Anduin summoned a metal magic book into his left hand. The two talismans exploded simultaneously as they neared the charging werewolves. First, a silent sound wave hum disoriented the werewolves, slowing them down instantly. The second talisman released a wave of magic that enveloped the werewolves, though no visible change occurred. However, the werewolves suddenly displayed panic, their steps becoming unsteady. One werewolf tripped over a stone, while another clawed at its eyes as if something had obstructed its vision, continuing until its eyes bled. The remaining werewolves either lost their way, rushing in random directions, or roared and screamed, wildly scratching at the air in front of them. Clearly, they had all lost their eyesight. This was the endless darkness amulet Anduin had crafted some time ago, and its effect exceeded his expectations, throwing the werewolves into chaos almost instantly. Meanwhile, the spirit-binding snake struck a werewolf. The snake, seemingly alive, twisted its body around the werewolf, binding it tightly. A dazzling magical aura lit up on the snake, triggering a strong electric current that incapacitated the werewolf, causing it to fall to the ground in convulsions. The runes on the new version of the spirit-binding snake had been significantly enhanced. In addition to the incapacitating spell, it now included energy-absorbing spells and wild thunder runes. The original incapacitating spell quickly drained the enemy's stamina, while the energy-absorbing spell siphoned off some of the lost magic power. Coupled with high-voltage electric shocks, it could almost discharge the magic power while extracting it, creating a near-perpetual motion effect. End of this chapter.